Hi there, how are you? Greetings and salutations on a Tuesday. Now, Eddie, have you been to San Diego, California?
Indeed, I have.
Okay.
I'm good, Jake. How are you?
I'm well, thank you. Have you been to...
Did you miss me?
No.
Good.
Have you
I
been
didn't miss you either.
to Miami, Florida?
No.
Yes.
Today's weather much more Everglades than San Diego, just so you know. Little hot, little sticky, little humid, but yesterday it was fun to be out at Colts camp in Grand Park in Westfield and get a chance to talk to Shane Steichen. That is still available, by the way, on the podcast at 1075thefan.com on the podcast center. Jake Query here along with Eddie Garrison. Jimmy Cook is here as well. It is Query & Company on the Fan. Thanks for listening to us. Jimmy, let's recap immediately because we have a big show lined up for today. A little Olympic talk in the first hour here. As a matter of fact, one guy from Central Indiana that just brought back hardware, Rajeev Ram, going to join us coming up about 10 minutes or so. Rajeev won the silver in the doubles. As we talked about yesterday, he is now the oldest tennis medalist in 116 years in Olympic history. He's going to join us. He's in Montreal now for the latest tennis event, but he's going to join us just about 10 minutes from now. Rowdy Gaines makes a return. He might be my favorite guest
I'm right there with you.
of all time.
Brings the energy every time.
Totally. Great guy. And swimming analyst for NBC. As swimming wraps up, he will join us at 12:30. We will talk to Dustin
Dopirak.
Thank you. At 1 o'clock, and then 2 o'clock, Stephen Holder joining us. But let's go back to begin, Jimmy, with yesterday. I thought the most revealing part of our conversation with Shane Steichen, and it's very hard for me to be able to determine just over the course of especially the practice that we saw yesterday. I mean, they only practiced for basically 85 or so minutes, and a lot of that was just kind of walkthroughs and light stuff. For me, difficult to tell this fact until Shane Steichen was open about it, and that is that it appears as though at the safety position it is still taking all applicants, right?
Yeah, and we talked about this a little bit yesterday, post-conversation with him. When this secondary is labeled, the entirety of it, not just the cornerback room, but in this specific instance, what they're going to do at safety alongside Julian Blackmon, when you have so many question marks about youth, about experience, combined with the absence of Samson Ebukam and the anticipated either extended role or maybe at some point down the line in the season a starting role for Laiatu Latu, so much is going to be asked of this secondary. And the main thing that you need back there is some form of stability with Gus Bradley leading the charge as the defensive coordinator. And he's mentioned this a couple of times, but most specifically, he mentioned it yesterday in the media scrum. Kevin Bowen, I believe, was the one that had the quote on 1075thefan.com. But, Jake, it's not just Shane Steichen that views it as an open competition. Gus Bradley views it the same way, and he's proud of what he saw yesterday from that young safety group. But you tell me this. I would have thought going into camp that wide receiver would have been the position we were talking the most about as a competitive competition battle, and it's not been that. It has been safety. Safety has been the area where if you're looking for a true definition of a spot that's up for grabs,
right,
that appears to be the definitive one.
What's interesting to me, and maybe we'll play some of this later, but when I asked about the receiver position, he didn't commit to like who was, say, the third or the fourth, but he did not hesitate in speaking glowingly about each and every receiver. When we asked about the tight end position, he was a little less committal on his, I don't want to misquote here.
Yeah.
I don't think that he dislikes his tight end room, but I don't think he's necessarily, there's anything that jumps out at him. I think the tight ends for the Colts, they have 5 Honda Accords, right?
Yeah.
Really solid, but nothing that blows you away, but certainly effective. When we asked about the safety position, that was where he got away from the generic coach speak of, I love all these guys, to simply kind of listing who they are and saying they're all working hard, which is kind of coach speak for it's wide open. Now, Julian Blackmon clearly is the clubhouse leader here, but you're switching him at safety positions, and you're just – I think that there are a number of guys – it's interesting because at the safety position, it feels as though the Colts have 3 or 4 guys that they love their athleticism and they're waiting for them to figure out how to play football. And then at the tight end position, they have 3 or 4 guys that they love their football size, but they're waiting for them to learn how to be athletic. Right?
Yes.
It literally is. And again, while admittedly understanding that the hybrid of those 2 traits are rare at those positions, which is why, the Kelseys and the Ronnie Lotts or the Ed Reeds don't grow on trees. I mean, don't get me wrong, but still, those clearly are the 2 positions, Jimmy, that are the most wide open right now.
I appreciated his honesty about the tight end room. I mean, the way I framed that question to him, basically saying, I know you're not going to disparage any of your players. I'm not asking you to do that. But, I brought up Dallas Goedert, who I've mentioned a couple of times when we've had conversations about Shane Steichen, and the fact that was a real tight end number 1 that was underneath his tutelage when he was the offensive coordinator in Philadelphia. And, yeah, naturally, a coach is going to want number 1 options at every single position. But as he outlined it, each member of that room, they all do things well. I want to see this year, and maybe it doesn't happen, Jake, because at some point with this group, and there's an argument to be made that I'm going too far here with like Kylan Granson or Will Mallory or guys that are still young in the tooth in terms of their not too much experience in the National Football League, to the point that maybe you don't know who they are yet. But guys like Moali Cox, guys like Jelani Woods, at some point they are what they are, which is a good, stable tight end in the league, but not a every down, do-it-all type of tight end that I think would benefit this offense. It's why it makes sense that if that was the target, if Bowers was the target when they had attempted that trade up with the Giants that Eddie had talked about last week, that the whole world saw from the offseason with the New York Giants on Hard Knocks. If that is who they were looking for, then it makes this training camp and preseason and the entirety of this season, Jake, all the more important for that room, because if they were looking for somebody this past draft, that means that what they have on the roster is not at a selling point where they can confidently say, that's our tight end of the future. And if that's not going to motivate a group like, oh man, they're looking for our replacement, I don't know what will. So you feel bad for the human element of it, that adversity is there, but this is a push up or shut up season, or put up or shut up season for all of that tight end room, you would think, if they were looking for a Brock Bowers when they try to trade up with the Giants.
And I would assume that, going back to the safety position, for example, and maybe even tight end, but more so safety, we love to have something to pick on Chris Ballard about. It's weird to me that people that want to pick on Chris Ballard don't just point out that he's 54-60-1 with a playoff win in like however many years, right? But
do you think people don't do that because so much of it has been skewed by Colts messaging and the luck of it all? We don't have time for that now.
And the league messaging of, I mean, just league wide, like he's the boy wonder,
yeah.
Right?
And he got 2 resets. You got a reset with the new coach, and you got a reset with the quarterback. So now people don't like to talk about the record because that
Correct.
was BA before.
But one of the things
Anthony.
that we like to pick on him about is that there's always a position that seemingly is neglected. And this year, our poster child of that is the safety position. And that is a position that one would assume perhaps through free agency, once there are releases made and there might be, a Mike Adams type player out there, and you can patchwork that if you don't like what you have in terms of the development of your room. And maybe that is the direction under which they're going. The Olympics continuing, by the way. Team USA getting underway just after we are off the air today. They are playing Brazil in men's basketball. Eddie has out his watermelon gummies because skateboarding is taking place right now.
Well, Andrew Nimhart is supposed to be on, but it's not.
Well, again, the skateboarding's on right now, right? They're showing Team USA, Eddie, right? Joining us now in the Express Pro Tire and Auto Guest Line, speaking of Andrew Nimhart's home country of Canada, our next guest is there right now. He was in Paris. He swapped one French-speaking city for another. Rajeev Ram, the pride of Carmel, Indiana, and the United States, who now, and I hate to say it this way, he is the oldest tennis medalist in 116 years, but you wouldn't know it because he has a full head of hair and still looks like he would be walking around at the age of 18 around Carmel, Indiana. But he joins us now on the program as now a two-time Olympic medalist. Rajeev, first off, a heartfelt congratulations on once again representing the U.S. the right way.
Thank you very much. That's very nice of you, and I love the introduction with the full head of hair.
It looks good, right?
Yeah. Hey, listen, those guys do a great job. What can I tell you?
Hey, I want to know, and by the way, wegrowhairindy.com. The whole process. I want to talk to you about, we could go on about just the epic finish and how close you were to gold and then silver, and we'll get into that. But the Olympic process in general, this was not new for you. And maybe it's a little bit different when you're a professional athlete, that this is just kind of the one of a long step of a series of events that you're doing around the world. But everything from the Olympic Village to the boats in the opening ceremonies, just take me through the whole process and feel of being an Olympian and being part of that in Paris and what the mood was like.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think, I'm very fortunate and lucky to be an athlete for my job and to do this for a living, but there's absolutely nothing like playing the Olympics, especially for a tennis player, because we don't play on a team regularly. We obviously play and represent our country regularly or whatever as it is, but it's not something you just, you don't play for that all the time. So it's like when this comes around every 4 years, it's a totally different feel. You play for something bigger than yourself. You play for your teammates, you play for your coaches, your country, your city, the whole thing. It just doesn't feel anywhere near the same. And I think it's not just the tennis players. I think it's every athlete in the world. And that for me is the biggest part of the Olympic experience is, everybody around just is that energy is just contagious. It's crazy, and you get to see the best athletes in the world in whatever sport they do in one city for that amount of time. And it's wild to think about. And yeah, I never thought I'd be necessarily in that position, let alone 3 times.
Now, is everybody staying, at least in the beginning, in the Olympic Village? I like to think of this as like summer camp with elite athletes and like all staying in dorms and everything else. But obviously I know that that's a little askewed. Take me through the accommodations.
Yeah, it's the highest level summer camp you've ever seen. No, we, as the tennis team, had the choice of staying at a hotel or in the village. In the village this time was quite a ways away from the tennis court. And actually Paris security was as big and as thick as I've ever seen it. So it was actually a little more advantageous for us, even though you kind of miss some of the other stuff, to stay at the hotel. For me, I felt like that was my best chance to do the best I could. So unfortunately this year I didn't stay in the village, but going to visit and going to see it and hang out, I did do, and just kind of getting that experience was amazing.
Okay, so this was your second Olympics, correct?
My third.
Okay, so you've been in Olympic Village before, and
yeah.
I think of it as like when you were at Illinois, if you remember when you were in college, Rajeev Ram is our guest, you always have that, like during finals week, you get some kids that like they take their last final on Tuesday, and then they go just hog wild bonkers because the finals are going until Friday. And I think of the Olympic Village the same way, as it might be nice to stay in the Olympic Village, except for that the fencing guys and the discus women are all done on Tuesday, and now all of a sudden it's like a drunken orgy for them, and you're trying to get sleep and ask them to go to bed. Is that how it works?
I don't know. I didn't run into that issue. None of my guys or girls on the team said they had that issue. We heard, the beds were probably not the most comfortable, and it wasn't the coolest because it was pretty hot in Paris a couple of days, and so the air conditioning wasn't always amazing. These little things. I didn't hear about any drunken orgies that they had to avoid.
I've heard
though.
it's
So
crazy though. Like I've heard people go nuts.
Yeah, I'm sure. Look, I mean, at the end of the day, you have these, have athletes that this is what they train for forever, and this is, once every 4 years.
Sure.
So I can only imagine when it's actually over, the amount of sort of like relief it could be too.
It's
so
actually,
I can only imagine.
Yeah, flippancy aside, it's very understandable, right? That you would just want to let loose a little bit. Yeah.
100%, and you then finally get to maybe enjoy the fact that you are an Olympian and you've gotten to this point in your career and everything else because the stress of your competition is finished.
Rajeev, you gave a quote shortly after you guys wrapped up competition and you win a silver medal. It was, if you had told me at the beginning of my career I'd have at least 2 Olympic medals, I would have said you're crazy. That's not going to happen. I'll sign for that any day. In our society today, so much of it, especially in the Olympics, is viewed as gold or failure. Like that's ultimately what has been indroned in society. I don't look at it that way, especially in a sport like tennis. If you're able to walk away on the podium, that's an incredible accomplishment. What do you attribute to have that level of perspective yourself so soon after winning silver?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's hard. I think you're absolutely right. I think, this is in society today, it's almost like if you don't win, you lost, and I feel like I did have a bit of that, especially because we were very close to winning that gold, and, we just felt like we came up a little bit short. But, I think I got to attribute that to my parents and my upbringing and my coaches and, everyone around me that's kind of been important, is that it's really not even about if you win or lose or whatever. It's how hard you try. And if you're try your best and give your best effort, and it amounts to whatever it is, it's a victory in a way. And for me, this last Olympics, that happened to still be a medal, which is incredible, But even if that happened to be first round or second round, and I gave it my best, it's still a win in itself. So I feel like that was an attitude that was sort of ingrained in me from the beginning, and I honestly feel like it's been a big reason I've been able to play for as long as I have.
How different was this run to silver than the one that you had with Venus at Rio in 2016?
Very different. That was my first Olympics. I was sort of not even sure what I was doing there. I was just, trying to take it all in, and you never know if your first is going to be your last and whatever else. And this time I kind of came around, and we had talked, my partner and I, Austin Krajicek, had talked about really giving us a good run as best as we could from kind of the beginning of the year. So it felt like we were much more prepared, and it felt like we were going about it in a different fashion. And, we both felt like we really earned our place there and earned the opportunity to try and win a medal. So it was a completely different feel, even though it was the same result.
Rajeev Ram is our guest. He's on the Express Pro Tire and Auto guest line. Rajeev, if I'm correct in this, and certainly correct me if I'm wrong, but both of your parents immigrated from India, and you're first-generation American. Is that correct?
Yes, that's right.
Okay, so you were born in Denver and then obviously grew up in Carmel. But I am curious from that perspective, as you're standing there and you're putting on a medal and you have, you look down and you've got the American flag on your uniform there, you're representing the United States, and, just everything for your parents, for example, to come over. I mean, that's a huge leap of faith for people to come to a new world, a new country. The pride that you must have to be able to represent the country and solidify, obviously, all that they gave for you to be here, and then for them as well to see you representing the United States, maybe even more so than other athletes within their nations in the games. Is that a fair statement about the pride you must have from the American standpoint?
It's funny you say that. I actually had that exact thought on the podium, because I thought, my parents had no idea what they were getting into when they came to the U.S. They were just, looking for a country with more opportunity and really for themselves, but for also their kids, in this case me. And I just, to wear the flag, to represent the U.S. in the biggest of stages, and to be on the podium for exactly all the reasons you mentioned, it might even be more special for me than some others, just because of what my parents did and what the country means to them. Because as immigrants, you don't really know what you're getting into, and that's a huge leap of faith, as you said. And they would have never thought that their, one of their, relatives, let alone their child, would be kind of doing that and representing the country in the Olympics. So I think for me, I feel an immense amount of pride, and I think my whole family does for that exact reason.
Rajeev Ram is our guest. You are now in Montreal, correct?
That's right.
They speak a totally different French there than they do in Paris, correct?
I believe so. I don't think people in France understand people from Montreal if
correct.
they speak French.
They're,
or at least they try not to.
they, like, I noticed that if they're very, they'll be the first to tell you they speak a different French between the two places, right?
Exactly. Yeah, it's like a different accent. It's like, not even the same language, really.
So did you come back to Indianapolis before going to Montreal, or did you go straight from Paris? And what % of athletes do it that way as opposed to staying for the closing ceremonies, etc.?
I can't really say for the other athletes. For tennis players, I don't think anyone stays for the closing ceremonies, because we have tournaments that start right away after the tennis competition is over. And I did come home to Indy for a night, not even 12 hours. I landed, had a massive delay in JFK, ended up landing at 10 o'clock at night. I had to leave again the next day at, my flight was at 2. So I literally went home, unpacked, repacked, put my stuff down, and just, grabbed whatever I needed for this next tournament. And, was at the airport again. Like, it literally felt like I never left. So,
what happens?
That's kind of the life of a tennis player.
What happens with the medal detector at the airport when you've got a medal, an Olympic medal on? I mean, do you go through TSA pre-approved, or do you just show that off and it's like Wayne's World, you can go wherever you want? How does that work?
I do go through pre-check. When I had it in Rio, I had it in a sock. And when I had it now just in Paris, I put it in a wristband. And sure enough, it gets, security bells go off, and they're like, what is that thing? And then as soon as you kind of take it out and be like, look, this is what it is, people get pretty excited to see it. But
how many TSA people
keep
take
it discreet.
How many of them take a picture with it?
A couple rounded around in JFK and said, oh, let's see that. Can we take a picture? And I actually had literally 10 minutes to go catch my flight. So I had to I could take one and I had to leave, but they were really nice, but it was like the weirdest look as to what it looks like on the little monitor. And then when they see it in person, they're all pretty pumped, I got to say.
And the first of the two medals, which one is cooler looking between the two that you've won?
Oh, cooler looking? I actually personally think this last one from Paris is cooler looking.
Okay.
It's got a little bit more artwork, a little more design. I thought it was a really nice piece.
And Rajeev, and again, my huge apology ahead if I'm incorrect in this, but I believe this is correct. Your father was able to witness your first medal, but your father is not. He has passed since in between the two. Is that correct?
That is correct. Yeah,
okay.
He passed in 2019. I won my first medal in 2016, and he passed in 2019.
So did that make either of the two more special than the other, or are they so unique to one another?
I think they're so unique in two different ways. Like I said, it was a different feel altogether right from the start. I will say I'm so thankful and grateful that my dad was able to witness one of them, because if it wasn't for him, I'm 100% sure I wouldn't be playing tennis, let alone playing, at this level. So I'm grateful that he got to witness one of them.
So tell me through the schedule of what you've got going on in Montreal and when things get underway.
Yeah, we start up here, I believe, on Thursday, so around the corner. So we have two tournaments, one here in Montreal, one pretty close to home in Cincinnati, which I'm really always looking forward to playing, and then a little bit of a 4 or 5 day break, and then off to New York for the U.S. Open, which I'm very much looking forward to playing again.
Now, the Cincinnati tournament is the one that essentially, and you tell me if I'm wrong, replaced the old, or not replaced, but is at the same time as the old Indianapolis first clay courts and then hard court championships, correct?
That's not quite right.
Did they go from one to the next, maybe?
Yeah, usually it was people played Cincinnati and then they came to Indy.
That's
when
what
I was
it was.
growing up, I was a ball boy at the tournament in Indy. Actually, that was the schedule, and then the whole thing got shuffled around, and actually the Indy tournament got moved to Atlanta.
Okay.
But no, Cincinnati and Indianapolis they didn't replace each other or anything like that. It was just they were consecutive weeks.
That's what I was thinking. And I had heard that Cincinnati may be at risk of that going away and moving, I want to say like Savannah or Hilton Head. I could be totally off on that. Has that already been reported, or am I off base?
That's pretty good knowledge, but unfortunately for the Midwest tennis fans, it's going to be staying in Cincinnati at least for the foreseeable future. So I'm pretty excited about that. That was a bit of a threat last year, let's say, but not to be anymore. So.
All right, Rajeev Ram, two-time silver medalist and the pride of not just Carmel, Indiana, not just University of Illinois, but the United States of America now, as bringing home the hardware from Paris, now on his way to Montreal. Rajeev, a real pleasure for us, and I'm thrilled for you. I'm thrilled for, obviously, your family, but just for the United States and you being able to do that, and the hair looks good, as the medal does as well.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me on the show. I love to represent the U.S. I love to represent Indiana whenever I can, and, just the support has been unbelievable.
I appreciate it. Good luck in Montreal, all right?
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Rajeev Ram joining us on the Express Pro Tire and Auto Guest Line. Very good stuff. I think they could do 30 for 30s on the stories I've heard about the Olympic Village, but maybe it's embellished, right? I kind of get it, though. If you had your choice between staying in the dorms or staying at a big hotel, you'd probably stay in the big hotel, right?
Yeah, I mean, especially when you hear about the cardboard beds, and like he pointed out, if you're a specific Olympian, Jake, tennis courts are right there outside the hotel versus having to navigate through Paris security.
That's a good point.
I don't want to deal with that.
Just stay at the Holiday Inn. They got the little courts right there, and you're good to go.
Exactly.
Rowdy Gaines is in Paris still, I believe. He's going to join us next. Our next guest, my voice just cracked there. I was so excited about it. Our next guest, I should say, Eddie Garrison, just aptly described in the break as an American treasure. It is hard to argue that. He joins us on the Express Pro Tire and Auto Guest Line. You have seen his commentary enthusiastically on NBC or Peacock covering all of the swimming events at the Olympic Games in Paris, and a return guest to this program, which is very appreciated. Rowdy Gaines joining us again. Bonsoir, Rowdy.
Bonsoir. Actually, you're right. It is bonsoir. Very nice. You guys, where'd you learn all that French?
Well, let me tell you, I was in Paris, and I walked in someplace at 2 p.m, said bonjour, and like an alarm bell went off. And it was like, ignorant American. And then they corrected me that bonsoir is good day and bonjour is good morning. I believe that's correct, right?
That's exactly right. In fact, they probably corrected you right away.
That's correct. All right, let's get right to this. Your work, because most of the swimming events as we know them, the events that are the big primary events, and I don't mean that to belittle any of them, but you get what I'm saying.
No.
Have been completed. Are your responsibilities in Paris done? Are you now spectator, or do you still have broadcast responsibilities?
Well, it's funny you ask because my wife and daughter just went to volleyball. We just saw Team USA in action in a quarterfinal. They just won literally 5 minutes ago. So I get to be a little bit of a spectator for a couple of days, but I've got open water on Thursday and Friday, the 10K, where women go Thursday, men go Friday. It's a little bit anticlimactic, and as you said, not to take anything away from these incredible athletes on Thursday and Friday, but the pool was so electric all week, and it's going to be hard to top that.
And Rowdy, the open water, if I'm not mistaken, that is the event or one of them that takes place using and involving the River Seine, if I'm not mistaken. And there was a lot of concern going into it about the cleanliness. They got that purified. Then they had rain. They thought maybe that might have contaminated it a little bit. Where do things stand in terms of that?
Well, as of now, the swim is supposed to take place in the Seine, as you said, and unless I hear differently, it's going to happen. The triathlon, I know a couple of athletes got sick, and I think Team Belgium even pulled out of the triathlon, but I know the swimming is going to take place. Now, there is a backup plan. We're going to go into the rowing facility if for some reason the river doesn't hold up as far as pollution goes. But right now, all systems go.
What was your overall impression in terms of, before we get to the specific accomplishments of the Americans? Rowdy Gaines, our guest on the Express Pro Tire and Auto Guest Line. Was there a nation that represented itself in these Olympic Games from the aquatic standpoint that impressed you going in, that you felt like deserved? Maybe they didn't medal, but you just thought to yourself, you know what, that's a country that really showed itself better than what was the expectation going in. That would be who?
I think when you look at it on paper, so many countries really did so much better than on paper. Italy, Hungary, certainly France. The host country was crazy, not only on Marchand. I mean, I think the folks that are home, we built up Lyon before, but France really swam so well overall as well. And, of course, Australia. And we knew Australia was going to swim great, but, they had a great job. They did a great job on the women's side. But overall, there were so many countries that, won. I mean, look at Ireland. Ireland won a couple medals. Daniel Whiffen won the 800. It was crazy. This is why the sport is a worldwide sport now.
Rowdy, one of the questions I asked you during the opening ceremonies when we last had you on was the rivalry between the United States and Australia, and kind of when the bubbling over point was for all of that. And some of my observations, at least stateside, maybe not between the swimmers, but just like on social media, the rivalry felt kind of one-sided. Like it felt more like Australia was the one that was making it into, oh, we don't really like the Americans, whereas the Americans here are like, okay, that's cool. But medal count-wise, U.S. outs them 8-7. Is this a win for the Americans, or is this just another reminder that the gap is closing and Australia's right there?
So when the Colts beat the Ravens 8-7, Is there any question?
No, there's not. There's not, but I didn't know if there's a nuanced aspect to this that maybe I'm missing other than,
right.
hey, gold medal count. Look at us.
I get it. I get it. I think overall the Americans probably underperformed a little bit, but I will say this going in, that was about the prediction for so many was about 7 to 8 medals. 7 to 8 gold. So I think when you look at it and look back, I think the U.S. did just fine. 68 years now, guys. I mean, come on. What sport, what team, what country could claim 68 years of excellence? And I think you're right about the Australians. They made a much bigger deal out of it than we did because I think we've always kind of felt like they're our little brother and sister. And I mean that with all due respect, but, for 68 years, come on now. It's like I can't even compare it to anything because it's been so long. But they are the New York Yankees times a million.
Rowdy, don't kid yourself. If the Colts beat the Ravens 8-7, we're doing 3 hours on why they couldn't get 2 scoring drives out of Anthony Richardson. Right? That's exactly what we're doing. Hey, Rowdy, I saw something interesting. I observed something interesting during the Olympics, and I'm a classic overthinker, so I want you to tell me if I overthought this, okay?
Right,
I'm watching, and I want to say the name correctly, Leon Marchand. Am I pronouncing that correctly?
Yep.
Okay.
Perfect.
So I'm watching him swim, and I'm seeing the coverage, and I'm watching Michael Phelps seemingly be impressed by, but also happy for a young man that he is getting into the Michael Phelps category of times and records and everything else. And I thought to myself, that speaks to the Olympics because I don't know that you are as excited if a guy's breaking your record of a world record at the Visa Championships. But because it's the Olympics and everything that goes into it, you almost by human nature have no choice but to be happy for someone that is championing themselves and their country, even if it comes at the expense of your previous record. Did you feel that sense?
Absolutely. I called the 400 IM with him earlier in the week, and Leon won that. And he was, here's the deal. I think Leon is such a nice person out of the pool. He's easy to cheer for. He's a really humble, gracious guy. So I think Michael recognizes that. He's had a chance to talk to him. Plus, he swims for Michael's old coach. He swims for Bob Bowman. So, there's that relationship. There's that kinship with him just from that standpoint because Bob is sort of like a second father to Michael in so many ways. So it's like a brother in many circumstances along the way. And there was a lot of pressure on this young man. I mean, people don't understand how difficult it is to swim or compete in an Olympic Games in your home country. And he did it with a lot of grace and kicked some butt along the way.
He's 22 years old, is Marchand. Are we going to be looking at 2028 in LA? Obviously, no one's probably ever going to touch what Phelps did, but are we looking at a potential back-to-back Olympics of Phelps-esque dominance for Marchand in 2028?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, this guy is just scratching the surface of what he's capable of. And you said 22 is pretty young in the sport now. I mean, you start to peak probably in your mid-20s, 25, 26. So he's going to potentially be even better in L.A. Now, of course, there are going to be a lot of Americans that will be better, and the pressure to be able to stay on top year in and year out. I mean, you know how that gets the professional sports side of things. It's just, everybody's gunning for you, and that's what's going to happen with Marchand the next few years. And just have to wait to see if this whole thing goes to his head or not. And the outside of the pool, outside of the arena, what kinds of things are going to happen. But if I know this kid like I do, and I've had a chance to talk to him a few times since he won, he's very humble about it. He said he's just grateful, and it's nice to see.
Couple more golds, he can afford to lose one at the Paris YMCA, right? And then
yeah. Oh, shut up. You remember that story? Oh my God, unbelievable.
Rowdy Gaines is our guest on the Express Pro Tire and Auto Gas Line. Rowdy, if you could, and I think people here are well familiar with it, but it is a dynamic one and one that ended triumphantly. That probably, from an Olympic standpoint, is the last that we will see of Lily King, who is certainly done Indiana proud and the United States. Your overall, I guess, just assessment and summary of her brilliant career in the pool.
I still say she's the greatest female breaststroker in history. I mean, people can argue with me all the time. That wasn't going to change regardless of what happened here in Paris. She missed the medal by 1/100th of a second, which would have been 3 successive Olympics. She had the best split of anybody on the relay the last night. She broke a world record with 3 other women in the relay. She's still the world record holder. I mean, that record was set, 7 years ago? I mean, so – yeah, she has really done so much for the sport in and out of the water. But I will say this. I predict right now we have not seen the last of Lily King. I think in 2028, the allure of swimming in your home country is going to be too strong, and I have a feeling we're going to see her back.
Is part of her, I'll use charm for a lack of a better phrase, or appeal of her story, the fact that it is somewhat the antithesis of the average Olympian route? In other words, wasn't like at the age of 5 at the top level facilities and coaching and everything else, and kind of was the iconoclast in terms of the coming through ranks. Am I overselling that?
No. In fact, I had never, probably early 2015, I had never heard of Lily King. Now, this is a year and a half before the Olympics where she won the gold medal, right? I had never heard of her. But then she had a really good summer in the summer of 2015. I think she won the Pan American Games gold medal. But it was, I won't say it was a late bloomer, but it was something that, like, wow, where is this coming from? This is a testament to say, you know what? You never, whatever it was. I think Noah Lyles put out a cool tweet the other day is, never stop believing in yourself. It's never too late. I didn't start swimming until I was 17. So it's sort of that story of you just should never give up on your hopes and dreams, as corny as that sounds.
She would be 31, I think, if I'm not mistaken, in the next Olympic Games. And Rowdy, I don't know, so I'll lean on your expertise here. In terms of the age of competitive international swimming from the female side, that would be really pushing the twilight, or that's pretty on par?
31 is it's old in the sport of swimming. But when you're the greatest, Michael won. I can give you a whole list of some. I mean, we just had a 30-year-old guy won the 50-meter freestyle from Australia. He's 30. So it's not out of the realm of a possibility. I think if she came back, I think Lily King would definitely make the Olympic team. I'm not saying she'd win the gold, but I think Lily King could definitely swim on the 400 medley relay for women again. That's my prediction. She's so good. She's so head and shoulders above everybody in the United States. And the United States, we have some pretty damn good breaststrokers.
Rowdy, I want to let you get back to your family. I appreciate the time. I did have one other question just because you're able to kind of take in some of the other sports. As you mentioned, you just watched volleyball. If you could, to use, I mean, you're familiar with Indianapolis, to use an Indianapolis analogy, the centralization of these games, in other words, it is spread out how far? I mean, is it as far from Indianapolis all the way down to a Cincinnati in terms of the venues of the different areas around France that they're using, or are you able to just hop around in Paris and go to literally, 15 different events in a 2-day span if you wanted to, if you were able to do that?
For the most part, yeah. I mean, everything. We're at the swimming pool. Our hotel is 100 yards from the pool, but you can get to anything you want to within 30 minutes. We caught an Uber here, and it took us 25 minutes to catch an Uber. Or the train is the best way to go. I haven't tackled the train, but yeah, Paris is a great host city, and I said this to you guys, whatever it was, a month and a half ago. There is no doubt in my mind Indianapolis could host an Olympic Games. Whether it happens in my lifetime, I don't know. But it would be the city I would pick right now, this very minute, to be the next host city in America if we had to pick a city to host.
Well, I've said forever, I would love to see it. If I ever become mayor, that's going to be the biggest campaign push. But the problem is going to be, if I'm mayor, Rowdy, that we can't use the White River or the canal for any of the aquatic events because it's going to be full of all of the scooters that we've dumped in there. That's going to be the only problem. That's the biggest part of my campaign push.
I get it.
You know, Rowdy,
I love your city, man. Go Colts, go Pacers.
Well,
Let's go.
we appreciate it, and I appreciate the time that you've lent to us now. I think on 3 or 4 occasions over the course of this, it's certainly added to the much needed professionalism of this show. So we very much appreciate it. We'll be watching towards the end of the Olympics for your coverage, and I hope you enjoy it with the family as well.
Thank you, buddy. Love you guys. Take care.
Right. Rowdy Gaines of NBC on the Express Pro Tire and Auto Guest Line. Listen, I love the fact that that's the. He said that now unsolicited, I think twice. I do believe, and I know that I am, gumdrops and lollipops when I say it, but I've always said I do believe that Indianapolis has enough at this point of the chromosome makeup to eventually grow into an Olympic city. I think it's closer than people think because it is a regionalized thing. You could go all the way to, and we've talked about it before, I realize, but if need be, you could use venues in Louisville or Cincy, base in Indy, and then use some of Assembly Hall and Purdue and everything else. The track and field stadium would be the big sell, right?
Yeah, I mean, I'm with you on that.
We have a huge open plot of land on an old cemetery over here where we can build it.
Maybe that'll be up for sale soon. I think that the quickest path for them would probably be, like you mentioned, a shared regional thing, where maybe it was Indianapolis and Chicago and somebody like that. But yeah, I mean, we're a world-class city when it comes to hosting sporting events. We've shown that time and time again. There's a reason why, we're seeing a lot of Big Ten conferences, championship games staying here, all the way up to, a bid to keep the Olympic trials from swimming. Yeah, it's a great world-class city, all the way back to, you mentioned the Pan Am Games, Jake, were a really turning point moment for a lot of sports fans in this city, but also for activists of what it means to be able to host events in this great town.
Team USA going to get underway just about, a little under, 3 hours from right now? Somewhere in there?
3:30.
One pacer is on the floor right now in the Olympic Games. We'll let you know what's going on with that. And Dustin Dopirak joining us coming up at the top of the hour. It's on its feet in Paris as Team France has jumped out to a big lead at the break over Andrew Nimhard and Team Canada. As a matter of fact, they're fired up. Rudy Gobert, I believe, did not even start the game, but they jumped out to an early and decisive double-digit lead. Victor Wembanyama has played well, and France is kind of off and running. They lead Canada at the break. Team USA coming up against Brazil at 3:30. Last night, late, I tuned in for the last 3 innings. Now, I told you, Jimmy. I told you.
You did.
21. The Chicago White Sox have now lost. And don't get me wrong, I'm rooting for history here. I've told you I'm not necessarily a White Sox fan, but we go to a White Sox game every year. And that alone has kind of a feeling of, there's a sentimentality, I guess, because we've done this for several years now. And that's kind of cool. But the fact that I was at the last White Sox victory of the year on July 10th, I want them to lose out now. And this losing streak has me invested. I'm all in on following the White Sox, following the scores, checking their games, knowing their schedule. I am all in. At this point, you've got to respect history. They have now, I believe, tied the American League all-time record, 21. I think the Baltimore Orioles started out 0-21 to start the 88 season.
That's what? They started what?
That's right, the cute fella.
They started what? 0-21?
Oh, Lord.
0-21. I speak like most normal people, right? And they lost. Look that up. I think it was 21. It definitely was 21, I believe, is the American League record. But
That's
I'm
correct.
pretty
That's
sure
right.
it was to start the either 87-88 or 88-89 season. But either way, I don't think they're going to break the record. I think, and I'm willing to push all in on this.
Which record? That one that they're tied with now, the National League record, or there's another one, a Major League low record that's held by the Louisville Colonels, which is a 26-game losing streak.
What's Major League low mean?
It must be outside the MLB. It's 1889. The American Association is what the league was called. So
That's what the American Association, baby. The Indianapolis Indians, champions for years of the American Association.
So I guess they're just saying the all-time losing streak in baseball.
Well, it's irrelevant because it ends tonight.
It does. That's what you said yesterday.
I told you yesterday, you mark my words, I've never been more sure of anything in my life. I've never been more sure of anything in my life than I am sure about the fact that the Chicago White Sox streak ends this evening. They're going to go into Oakland in front of 4,100 fans that all think they're in Sacramento.
It's generous.
And they are going to go into Oakland. Literally, somebody said to me, I go, yeah, I listened to some of the White Sox A's game last night. And I said, think about, as I said yesterday, the A's have to be the only place that the White Sox consider to be a hostile road environment, right? Or the White Sox have to be the only team that consider the A's a hostile road environment because they play in front of 2,000 and there's 4,000 in Oakland. And he said, yeah, it's probably, like ham radio participant night. Chicago Cub Scout Pack 282 night, that kind of thing, right?
Let it be known I've not pressed search yet on this.
Okay.
So I'm still in the running to play this game with you guys.
Okay.
Over under $9 get in the door price tonight.
Oh, well, people might be there for history.
I know. That's
People
why I'm
might
trying
be
to
there
figure
for
out where to
history.
set this. Do we want to? Am I wrong on the number? Or do we want to put the number
in
at?
Oakland, right?
Yes.
In Oakland, over under to get in. You're going secondary market,
I'm
right?
going secondary market, and I'm using a site where there's no fees. So we're just going straight the price of the ticket. Did I set it too low,
Now,
Eddie?
No, I'm going to say that people are overly optimistic and they're trying to get $11 for their ticket. So I'm going to say over.
Okay.
But
I'm going to say under. Eddie, do you want to pick a side, or are you going to abstain?
I'll abstain. I'll keep it between you two.
I'd like to know what last night's attendance was. Do you have it? Do you have the answer there, Jimmy?
On the price?
Yep.
The get in the door price tonight, Eddie. We have an X for me, but do we have a victory sound for one Jake Query? $12. The starting price for tickets.
People are being very optimistic.
I tell you what, though, quite a jump here for Wednesday. It's $23. So I don't know.
Attendance last night, 4,971.
I said 4,100. 4,971. Man,
Allegedly.
Yeah, I want in caps allegedly there. So $12 gets you in the door to potentially
that's
witness
tickets
history.
sold, right? There were 300 people that noticed that the Hooters across the street had free wings night.
They also gave
they
away
went over there.
500 to the local Boys and Girls Club. So I mean, you
No
got to
question
stack
about
the
it.
stack
No
the crowd
question about
somewhere.
it. But tonight, I'm telling you, the 27-88 Chicago White Sox tonight get win number 28. Mark my words. They're 10-48 away from home, 11-48 after tonight. The White Sox are going in and shocking the world and shocking the A's.
I just want it to happen because if not, I just know it's going to happen to the Yankees. The Yankees are going to be the team to lose. They play them next week. I'd want it to happen before then.
No, well, the streak begins once they win. It's
Well, no. But that's what I'm saying. If they don't win tonight,
but once
if for some reason you were wrong.
You want the White Sox, Jimmy, you want the White Sox to keep losing because once they get that win, they flip the switch.
Oh, you think they're boat racing after that?
No question. No question. All they got to do, all they got to do is win 61 straight and get themselves back to 500. They're good to go. Eddie Garrison here, Tears for Fears. During the break, I asked this to Eddie and Jimmy. I should bring, you know what? We'll bring Dustin into this equation.
Did we disappoint you, by the way?
No, not
Is
at all.
one of those
because
where you get disappointed?
This is a random Jake Query brain drop, just so you know. Dustin
Dopirak
joins us from the Indianapolis Star. He's on the Express Pro Tire and Auto Guest line. Dustin, before we begin talking about Team USA that's in action tonight, let me ask you this. On a 1 to 10 scale, 10 being the most, 1 being the least, what is your level of fandom of Major League Baseball?
10.
10. Okay, excellent.
Pretty much, yeah.
Your team is who?
Pirates.
Okay. I'm glad that there's something in baseball that equates to a 10 for you then. Okay. I want you to.
It hasn't been easy, yeah.
Are you near a laptop computer by chance, or a computer in general?
I can be very quickly. I just let my dog
I need you to
outside,
pull up the Oakland Athletics logo. Just the A's logo, okay?
Mm-hmm.
Do you notice anything subliminal in that logo?
Hold on a second here.
If you look at the logo with just the A apostrophe and then the smaller S, do you notice anything in the logo? That'd be a no. Okay.
I feel like it's going to take me a while. It's odd that the S and the A are different fonts.
Okay.
At least I think
the key here is the font of the apostrophe. An apostrophe typically is like an inversed comma, right? It starts with kind of a rounded top and then curves down to the right, correct?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
What state does that apostrophe?
I'm seeing two different images with two different apostrophes.
Okay. The apostrophe, for example, on ESPN.com is a blocked apostrophe that comes to a point that looks eerily reminiscent of the state of Nevada.
I just got this. Okay. All right. I see where you're going with this.
Now, is there a graphic designer somewhere that pulled the wool on all of us and we didn't even notice it? And now all of a sudden the Oakland Athletics are going to be the Las Vegas Athletics if they ever get the stadium approved? I'm just saying. I'm just saying.
This was in the cards all along. They've been working on this all along.
That's correct. But I'm telling you, I think that might be a new font on the apostrophe. All right, Team USA in action. Tyrese Halliburton got minutes against Puerto Rico, the only player I believe that did not score, but his minutes have been, few and far between within the Olympics. We've talked about this, and you tell me if this is just an Indiana narrative that we've made up for ourselves. He ain't playing because he doesn't guard anybody. True or false?
Well, yes, but also the guy who's playing ahead of him really, really does guard somebody. It's Derek White. It's not a situation where it's a guy that's an okay defender. I mean, he's, second team All-NBA defense. I think that's the biggest reason. That's what changed. I mean, he was getting minutes up until Derek White was added to the roster after Kawhi Leonard was let go, and they basically saw 2 point guards, one of which could really, really defend and the other one couldn't. And basically, if you needed a bunch of offensive push out of that second unit, you could play Halliburton if you wanted to. But, they have plenty of scorers on that second unit. I mean, Edwards and Durant have been coming off the bench, and so it's not like you need Tyrese to create a lot for other people to get them buckets on that team. In this case, they've got guys who can create on their own, and they could use somebody who could be an on-ball defender, and Derek White's a really, really good one. I mean, again, we're not talking about average. We're talking about one of the best, 3 or 4 on-ball defenders in the league. And so I think it's as much that Derek White can really, really guard as much as the case that Tyrese Halliburton can't. But defense is definitely appears to be the reason for me. I mean, I can't see another reason why this would be going on. But White's, White's just really good, and they need to be able to defend. This group has to be able to guard, and they are the best all-around defensive team in this tournament so far.
I guess if nitpicking hypotheticals that don't exist, would they have added Derek White if Tyrese Halliburton defended?
I mean, if he was a really good one, probably not. I guess it's fair to say. You're probably right about that. If Tyrese was a really good top-of-the-line defender, they might have looked for a bigger wing. They might have looked for somebody who, maybe Jaylen Brown gets on the team if Halliburton's a really good defender. But he's not. I mean, he's obviously not close to being that. I mean, obviously Halliburton gives you something on defense. I make a point of pointing this out that he can do a lot off the ball because he's just got that incredibly high basketball IQ. He knows where to be, but he's just not locking down anybody man to man. And so if he was a really, really good one, if he was a all defensive level guard, then you probably don't get Derek White in that case. You're probably happy with what you have.
Bigger Pacer benefit through the Olympics. Halliburton just being around and also other players continuing to get to know Tyrese Halliburton of elite-level players, or Andrew Nembhard being able to flex a little bit and be the elite-level player that is carrying his team in games?
Probably. I mean, I would probably say Nembhard's a little bit more, but they're both important. It's definitely good and healthy for both of these guys to be out there and being a part of this. I think, if you told Halliburton when he was 12 that he would be on this team and he would get no minutes, you still would have signed up for it 1,000 times over. And I think he is getting a lot out of it. I mean, it does seem like from what you can tell on TV, he's sitting next to these guys and getting in their ear and trying to learn stuff. You can just even see that. I mean, obviously you don't know what conversations he's having, but you can tell he's animated all the time and he's getting something out of it. But Nembhard's definitely continually adding confidence. I mean, you just get the impression that there's a really positive wave for him really since the playoffs, just an increased level of aggression. I mean, he just trusts himself a lot more. It seems like he got told going into the playoffs, hey, man, you got to make a point to score. Don't just make a point to move the ball around and be quiet on the offensive end. Go get yours. Go get some buckets. And he's been really good at that for Canada in this tournament. Nobody's having a great day today. They're down 19 and they're in some trouble. But all in all, I mean, he's maintained the same tough level of defense. I think that really helps him going forward. I mean, I think a good aggressive Andrew Nembhard is I think would be really, really helpful for them if they're trying to make another leap this year.
Joining us on the Express Pro Tire and Auto guest line, he covers the Pacers for the Indy Star. Dustin Dopirak is our guest. Dustin, looking at the bracket, you mentioned France. They went with a smaller lineup today, and they've been giving Canada fits throughout the entirety of that first half. Obviously, third quarter underway now. Let's say that Canada gets bounced today. I felt this way after the showcase, that it was going to be old status quo, and Team USA is going to go out and get gold, and maybe they'll get tested here or there. Maybe have a close title game, but they're destined to win gold again. Looking at who's left standing for them, semifinal, you would think, with Serbia. What's in their way? Who is the biggest threat to them? Is it France because of them being the host country and having a collection of NBA superstars in their own right? Is it Jokic and the Serbia YMCA finally putting together a high-level performance against Team USA? Where is the biggest threat to them at this stage?
I mean, Germany's really good. I think they get forgotten about a little bit, but that's your defending world champs. Obviously, those guys won in FIBA, and they have the benefit of they have mostly the same team that won in FIBA, and they're the same high level guys. Franz Wagner has been tremendous. Moritz Wagner's pretty good. I mean, Dennis Schrader, I think, does a really good job playing point guard for that team. Daniel Tice is a legit international basketball center. For whatever reason, he has wasn't that productive for the Pacers. He didn't get a lot of opportunity, obviously, because they were trying to push the young guys. But that German team is really sharp, and it plays really, really well together. I mean, and they obviously, won the World Cup last year, and they handled Greece this morning. And just, I think that team's really good. I think they're really a problem. If Canada gets bounced, I mean, France and Germany will get a rematch, and Germany managed to handle France pretty easily in group play, and so I think Germany's a problem. If U.S. does get by Serbia, I mean, the U.S. is really fortunate for how the bracket shook out for them. I think Canada, France, and Germany were the next three best teams in the tournament, and they were fortunate enough to avoid all three of them in their half of the bracket, not having to see any of those three until the gold medal game is a gift. And they've been able to handle Serbia, twice already. I think that team's just okay. I don't know if they would have had more trouble with Australia. That was a really good game this morning as well. But I think, if Canada gets bounced, Canada and Germany, I think are the two best teams. But France obviously gives you the chance with the size to do some things, and they're playing just phenomenal today. This is the best I think I've seen France look so far. But I think Germany's a real problem.
We talked about going into the showcase camp and the countdown to the Olympics, what type of minutes that Tyrese Halliburton would get. I feel like he's averaging right around 6 or 7 minutes, at least in Olympic group play. I could be off on that, but you look at the box score every night, 6 minutes here, 10 minutes last game against Puerto Rico. If that divvying up of minutes continues for him, will there still be an opportunity for him to have an Olympic moment, or is this team so balanced that type of call probably won't arrive for him?
I mean, I think he kind of had his moment against South Sudan when he hit a couple threes in a row, in terms of where it's going to get. I mean, he got to get on the floor. He got to, see the ball go in the hoop. I mean, I think that's mostly what it's going to be. And now there's an opportunity. Like, I don't think he's getting rotation minutes against Brazil, and I don't think he's getting rotation minutes against, if they win, against Serbia. And then I certainly don't think he's getting rotation minutes in the gold medal game at the end of the day if they get there. So I think, ultimately, Steve Kerr has made his choice. Derek White's a second unit point guard, and that he's a second unit point guard because he's a better defender. And so if the situation changes, if he feels like, I guess there's a chance he decides that he really needs more offense out of that second unit. But I feel like he's getting plenty, again, with Edwards and Durant, kind of playing in that group. I think he's got guys that can create on their own. He doesn't need that. He needs a guy that can, continue to play really good on-ball defense. And so I think he's happy with what he's getting out of Derek White. So I don't think it's going to change much. Again, I think he'll have their, if they go out and blitz either Brazil or Serbia, I think he'll get some garbage time minutes, get an opportunity to get out there and whatnot. But I don't think at this point that the rotation is going to make a dramatic change, that he's going to be a part of that. He's going to play 10, 15 minutes in either one of in any of the three games in the knockout round.
Dustin, how old a fella are you, if you don't mind me asking?
What's up?
How old a guy are you?
I'm 42.
42. I'm going to guess the Dustin
Dopirak
all-time favorite Pittsburgh Pirate list. Okay. Now this is tough because there are a lot of variables on this. I mean, you
sure is.
There are guys that you may never have seen played. I mean, I'm assuming you're a native of that area, and I'm assuming that still, even though it's well before the time of anybody in this conversation, that Roberto Clemente has to be on the list, right, for the obvious reasons. But
yeah.
I'm going to go here. I'm just going to start spitballing names, and then you stop me when I'm, Jason Kendall.
Yeah, I mean, that was part of the rough period.
Okay. Okay. Barry Bonds.
Sure. I mean, obviously complicated scenario there, but
Bobby Bonilla.
You better believe it.
Okay. I'll go with, and I always forget how to say his last name. Mike, was it Lavalier? Is that how you said it? The catcher?
Lavalier. We said it Lavalier. We might not be right. We say everything wrong at Pittsburgh.
Okay, but he's got to be on the list, right?
Sure. Yeah.
Andy Van Slyke?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
Okay, now I'm assuming you're too young to remember Dave Parker, Willie Stargell, Bill Madlock, right?
So I remember Parker was still in the league. Parker was in Oakland when I started watching baseball in '89, and so that was like my first when I was 7 years old. So Dave Parker was on that '89 Oakland team that won the World Series. So I remember him being on that team, and then my dad telling me, "Oh, he played for the Pirates. You should have seen him then." So
now, what about the fella that took the baseball bat and hit the hot dog in Milwaukee, Randall Simon?
Randall Simon, yeah. Is he on my list of all-time favorites? Right. No, but I recall that vividly.
So who are your three favorite Pirates of all time?
Three. I mean, I have to put Van Slyke on there because that was my childhood idol.
Okay. All right.
When I was little. So I would say, McCutcheon's a weird one to discuss because I covered him. So basically, he obviously brought them back, and so I mean that's after 20 years in the wilderness. So I would probably. So I mean, I guess I had to leave him off because I covered him because I
Sterling Marte would be in that same category then, right?
Right, exactly. I covered the 17 team. So Marte, McCutcheon, Josh Bell, those guys I covered. So I look at them differently.
And they all came through here, obviously. Yep. Right,
exactly. All AAA Indians guys I enjoyed covering.
But you got to have at least one Pirate that wore those ridiculous painter's hats in 1979, right? I mean, you got to.
Yeah. I mean, I think. Stargell. I would say, in a looking back at them list, it's probably Clemente, Stargell, and Mazeroski, just out of, my Mazeroski was my dad's favorite guy in 60 World Series and all those kinds of things. So those are probably the top three in terms of historical guys I never got to see.
Now,
go ahead.
For years, Dustin, I've done radio now, shockingly, actually, for a couple of years in Indy. And literally anywhere I go, I could go to the Olympics in Rio de Janeiro and I could be at Christ the Redeemer and somebody will come up to me and say, September's Talk Like a Pirate Day. When I do my Talk Like a Pirate Day, it absolutely flies off the shelves. People go crazy for it.
Kids love it. Yes.
Kids do love it. We've had a lot of research on this.
Eye patch sales go through the roof.
Yes, it is. It's incredible. No. So would you like to, just in honor, to mix it all in, because
don't fall for it.
But the reality is, if you're a fan of the Pittsburgh Pirates, because Talk Like a Pirate Day is in September, and the Pittsburgh Pirates haven't been relevant after August in 30 years. So do you want to come on for Talk Like a Pirate Day and we'll book you?
Sure. We can do that.
I'm just telling you.
And I'll discuss Pirates trivia on.
Now Dustin, you know my favorite joke.
Terrible voice.
My favorite joke. You know the Pirates' favorite letter in the alphabet, right?
R.
No, it's the C. See, and again, people walk right into that every time.
Yeah, I bet they do.
They walk right into that, or down the plank. It's one or the other, right? Anyway.
Exactly.
Aren't you thrilled you come on this program, Dustin?
This is what I sign up for, actually.
I'm sure it is. I'm sure it is. All right.
Going in this direction.
Lastly, Team USA against Brazil coming up 3:30. We are looking for what today? And has Steve Kerr kind of narrowed down, if you will, the rotation of who we're going to see get the primary 5, 7, 8 guys in terms of minutes?
Yeah, it seems that way to me. I mean, I think it's just are they going to make shots? Or are they going to be able to just win by just grinding guys out? I think what's really stood out, I think, in this tournament is just how well they've defended. Just as a group, I think that Adebayo Davis combination has been really good for them. Having Holiday and White as on-ball defenders is kind of keeping them in games. I mean, they're never going to be the USA, the way it's run, is never going to be the most cohesive unit, so it's not going to have that kind of same chemistry that Germany does when you play with the same team through several tournaments in a row and you're playing every year. But they've obviously, leaned on the vets. LeBron and Durant have been, sensational. So it's like if they defend well enough and they get good performance out of the top scorers, they should be able to cruise past Brazil. Brazil's got a couple of guys, and they've got some physicality. I haven't watched them super close in this tournament, but if they do what they're supposed to do, if they defend well and they make enough shots, that should be enough to get them through.
By the way, when they're getting the shots, Jimmy, you know what kind they are?
What's that?
Captain Morgan's. Yeah, okay. Dustin, we appreciate it. Thanks. We'll let you get to the basketball game here.
Sounds good. Thanks, guys.
I'm sure thrilled to be joining us on the program. That's Dustin
Dopirak
on the Express Pro Tire and Auto Guest line.
I hated every second of that.
Well, you haven't even gone through a Talk Like a Pirate.
No, he did.
Yes,
we did.
yes.
We got the first one.
Yes, we did.
No, listen.
Are you saying that was a tame Talk Like a Pirate day?
I gave you guys. See, you go to the state fair, for example.
Sure. We'll be there on Thursday.
I gave you the Angry Mouse. It's just like the little kitty ride, right? I gave you that.
Why? Why were we robbed of greatness?
You weren't ready yet.
We
for
were ready.
The vortex.
Okay.
You weren't ready for the vortex.
All right. Stop.
All right.
Just wait. Speaking of which, have we given away all tickets, Eddie?
Yes.
Chiefs fan Steve
Okay.
won tickets to the state fair and was asking about the claim of said state fair tickets.
So it changed from the time when he won.
Okay.
So about halfway through the week last week, I can't remember the other winners on Monday and Tuesday, but now you have to come down to the circle to pick those up.
So I need to hand deliver them to Steve. Steve took me to the Indians game, so I feel compelled.
Yes, you just have to get in contact with the promotion staff, Jake.
I think he's driving around right now because he just sent me from his dash that it says outside it's 119 degrees. I don't know if Steve's driving through like the Mojave or things are just hot on the south side. I don't know, right? But might want to stop and get a little coolant. You know what I mean? It was a little sticky yesterday, was it not, Jimmy?
It was. Look, I mean, I love being class
great.
outside, right? Or being out of the house and being at Colts camp. But yeah, I mean, I don't know who it was on the Colts staff, somebody in the equipment room. And I get the theory for wearing long sleeves because you see roofers do it all the time, right? It's easier to, protect yourself from the sun and you're retaining the natural element of your sweat that helps cool the body down. But seeing Colts equipment staff in full-on hoodie and long pants, and as miserable as the weather was yesterday, I tip my cap and I admire them because I'm just there in a polo and golf shorts.
I kind of liked it. Once you get used to it, I kind of like just being in that. It kind of felt like when I was in Iowa, just that sweltering heat.
Sure. Yeah.
Did I notice you brought a towel, Jimmy?
I did bring a towel. I didn't bring bug spray, but I brought a towel because the last time we did a remote at Grand Park, there's a very sweaty headset, Eddie, and I didn't want that to be the whole day. So I did bring a towel. You're correct.
Well, that's appreciated, right?
Yeah.
That you had the forethought to know that to clean down the headset if that would be the case.
Try to, yeah.
That's very polite of you.
Thank you. Every now and again I do that.
I was a little surprised by this, and I know that this is true theoretically of every team in the NFL. And it's not like yesterday was the groundbreak for me on this because obviously we've been covering camp and talking about it, and I want to make very clear here, I'm not saying this is a poo-poo on the way things have gone at all. I mean, they can certainly come off that way. It doesn't bother me at all. But I remember, for example, like when Jim Mora was running camp for the Colts. Or back in the Anderson days or Terrell. I mean, it was literally two-a-days for, and maybe my mind in hindsight embellishes it a little bit retroactively, but they were two-a-days for literally like 2.5-hour practices and hard hitting and moving and, the Junction Boys type stuff and the stopping and going and basically getting out of the garden hose and getting out literally, but, water breaks and the bottles and then right back to
barefoot
it
over
and whatever
spikes.
else.
And
yeah, and I mean, yesterday was a
coals.
lot of, and I know there's a method to it. I mean, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying they don't know what they're doing, but it is much more, laxed is the wrong word. Don't get me wrong. I'd last 5 minutes of it. But there's a lot more walkthrough and just repetition of just precision than there is actually the running of plays. And maybe that's by design. I mean, maybe, literally receivers just practicing breaks and routes. And, it's not necessarily like I said, the old, we're going to go out to some outpost in the middle of nowhere. If you think about where NFL training camps used to be, I mean, the Colts are one of the few now that don't just have it within their own facility. And eventually they'll obviously go back there to West 56th. But, I think the Cowboys may still. They might be. Can you look, Eddie, and see where the Dallas Cowboys take training camp? They used to go out to California.
They still do.
They still do. Okay, then, and outside of that, I mean, the Bears used to go to Rensselaer, Indiana, and teams would go out to West Texas, and
the Chiefs go to St. Joe's. They're not at their own complex. They go. If they go to college campus, but it's not like a like you said, a statewide
20
tour.
minutes away, right? I
It's
mean,
not like
it's kind of like going to Anderson.
I believe it's like 6 teams practice away from their facilities when it comes to training camp.
And the Colts are one of them, obviously, right?
Uh-huh.
So
So are the
that's my
Cowboys.
point is and maybe every team is going to it this way, but the thing that I'm curious about, this sounds ridiculous what I'm about to say, but there has been a theme for the Colts. With any team that are you familiar with the Bader-Meinhof phenomenon, Jimmy?
Vaguely familiar, but no.
The
for the sake of
Bader-Meinhof
radio.
phenomenon is this, and once I explain it to you, you're going to go, I know what you're talking about. The Bader-Meinhof phenomenon is, a good example of it is if you buy a new car and you get yourself a new car and you're like, you know what, I went out and I bought myself an orange Toyota FJ because these are new cars and I've never seen them in the color orange. And you buy one and then all of a sudden you notice that every third car on 465 is an orange Toyota FJ.
Yes, sure.
Or if somebody says
Yep.
to you, somebody uses a word that's not in your regular lexicon and you're like, what was that word? And they say it and you say, well, what is that? And they say, oh, it's a cylindrical device that you use in the backyard to
Chip.
And then before you know it, you're hearing it all the time, right? That's the Bader-Meinhof phenomenon. Now that it's in the forefront of your conscience, you're hearing it all the time. So what I'm about to say may be something that it's Bader-Meinhof phenomenon with the Colts. Maybe it's only because someone mentions this as a possibility to the Colts, and it feels like it happens with the Colts, or it's more prevalent to that franchise because that's the one that we talk about and that's the one that we follow. And in reality, the numbers would dictate that it's the same for the Arizona Cardinals, the Minnesota Vikings, the Green Bay Packers, the Miami Dolphins. But we feel like it's more prevalent in Indianapolis. Or it may be that I witnessed something yesterday and said to myself, maybe that's it. Maybe it's not Bader-Meinhof phenomenon. Maybe it's not biased towards this franchise. Maybe it's not the fact that I think of and talk about and watch the Colts more than others, but maybe I just discovered something that is actually a valid observation about the Colts, and it's not unique, or it's not league-wide, but unique to the Colts themselves. And I'll tell you what that is, and we'll discuss it, and you guys can tell me I'm wrong next. I was waiting to see if this was the Police version or the Diddy version that Eddie went with here. That song was ubiquitous in the summer of 83, I think. Like, literally, I think it was number one for like 15 straight weeks. It was everywhere. And everybody's like, it's such a great love song. And then you later found out, like, nah, I think the dude's stalking her. Right? I think he's basically saying, like, don't go anywhere. I'm going to be watching you the entire time. Yesterday, we were watching the Colts practice, and Shane Steichen, pretty sharp guy. I mean, I'm not telling anybody stuff that people don't already know. But when I was talking to him during the interview, you can get a lot from an in-person interview, even more so than like over a phone or whatever else, because you can see the person's eyes. And you can tell sometimes if somebody's saying something they don't totally believe and they're giving you kind of a lip service, and you can tell when there's something that they're passionate about because they get an energy and an extra step in themselves. And Shane Steichen had that when talking about different players. A.D. Mitchell comes to mind. He stuck around once we were done talking to him. He stuck around afterwards to continue to go on about A.D. Mitchell and talking about different nuances of A.D. Mitchell's game. And Steichen is all in on football. Do not get me wrong. But I'm curious of this. And it's only the second year that we've seen Shane Steichen as the head coach. And before that, of course, you had Frank Reich, and then before that, Pagano. And, we've seen a number of different coaches. And football in general, and the Players Association and other such things are all factors in a lot of what I'm about to mention. But while the practices are less physical and less physically demanding, not a bad thing per se. But the Colts last year, if I'm not mistaken, had the 12th highest, which is basically just in front of the middle of the pack in injuries. They were the second most injured team in 2022. They were like 11th or 12th in 21, I think. And before that, there was talk, especially in the beginning of the season, that the Colts injury report became almost like, what in the world is going on? And I am curious. And maybe this is true league-wide now. I can't speak to the way the Washington Commanders or the Denver Broncos or the New York Jets. Now, the Jets you'd think you'd know because when they had Tebow for a while, their ESPN was breaking in every 5 minutes to tell you what was going on at camp. But I don't know the exact regiment of other teams' camps. I mean, I covered training camp for the Rams in St. Louis, but it was 20 years ago. The only other franchise I've covered was the Rams. So comparing the Rams to the Colts is apples and oranges because it was different eras. It was Dick Vermeil versus, it was, again, actually almost 25 years ago. And I think that most teams probably, Jimmy, do it the way the Colts do. And as much as the league is trying to protect, and I understand it, protect the players from the repeated collisions and abuse over the course of camp, I also wonder if the physical nature of camp does condition the body more towards the rigors of the actual game, or are you going from a golf cart to an IndyCar crash when it comes to the power of the collision of Sundays in the NFL?
It's a fascinating conversation because there's a lot of data points to discuss in regards to how the body deals
and
with
probably both ways, right?
The level of strain that you're putting on it over the course of the NFL season and how you get your body ready for said strain. I would point out, though, why I have a hard time figuring out what the best way to operate camp is because they keep adding games. Like, you could say, oh, well, maybe injuries wouldn't happen, let's say. I'm not saying that's the point you're trying to make, but let's just say for the sake of argument, injuries wouldn't happen as often if camps were as physical as they used to be, or if you were putting the body through more strenuous circumstances to get ready for that. Well, back then you're only playing 16 games or 14 games, and now probably 18 on the horizon.
Right.
It's at a point, Jake, where let's take off the media hats for a second, and let's just look at this as fans of the game. I love the people at Grand Park. I think they do a tremendous job hosting training camp. I love following it, but I say this every year. My biggest thing from camp to week 1 is everybody stay healthy. That's the only thing I care about.
Yeah.
Because, yes, and Shane Steichen was honest about this yesterday. He was honest the whole conversation, but he's particularly honest about this point. There's a heavy balance between how many minutes or snaps do you give your starters over the course of the preseason versus how much of the preseason now, going from 4 games to 3 games a couple of years ago, and you would think that number is going to continue to dwindle down as the years go by. How much of that is solely based on finding guys that are living on the margins that are just fighting for a roster spot? That stuff is still invaluable. You need that as you're making your 53-man roster. But so much of what I view camp is now in the modern age is not just staying healthy, but getting the rust off. The joint practices are a very useful tool as well that kind of sub out what a preseason game would have been to some extent. That's what they've become. And then the other thing is the scenarios of a camp, which is the 2-minute drills or your 4-minute offense or your end-of-game drives, which Coach Steichen talked about how that was going to be a part of practice yesterday, how it's a part of practice throughout training camp. There's situational elements that'll always be invaluable for camp. But in terms of the strainness of the body, like, Jake, I am not an athlete of any proportions that would ever even sniff a minor league football field, let alone the National Football League. But outside of, proper weight training and conditioning, that sport's insane. Like it is, I love it, but it's objectively insane to put your body through that. I don't know how much you're really saving yourself by saying, hey, yeah, let's go beat the you-know-what out of each other through camp because that will be ready for week 4 against the Raiders.
I haven't done the study on this, but I'm curious to see because the Colts are one of these teams. When they go through training camp, they're practicing on grass fields. So it feels like the teams that are practicing on grass go through less training camp injuries. And then during the course of the season, almost 99% of the games are on turf. And I would just want to highlight this now. The Colts just got new turf over at Lucas Oil Stadium. And typically, when you get new turf, a lot of injuries come just because of how new and fresh the turf is.
And I think it's not grass, but it's also a different kind of turf than what they had before, right? Like it's not just they added new turf. I was under the impression that the turf they were selling to the audience and to the fans was it's supposed to be better for overall health than the turf they had before.
Well, now this goes into a whole different area. And Eddie, it's a very good point. I think that the simulated turf, field turf, they've got all kinds of different names for it. But you know because you see, and if you ever walk down there, Jimmy, have you ever done sidelines for like the football state finals, that kind of thing?
Oh yeah, and then I made the mistake of wearing dress shoes for 3 state title games, and I wound up with a bruised ankle and turf all the way up to my ankles.
Correct.
Yeah,
because you sink into it. It's awful, right? That was the most sore I've ever been when you're on those sidelines for a long time. Because it's not a hard bound. I mean, it's kind of mattressy, if you will. It's like being on a waterbed. But I think that the danger you run into is the foot getting overplanted. I think the field turfs, they are trying to make them softer. I mean, think about the RCA Dome. Guys in the RCA Dome were playing literally on concrete that had a 1/2 inch styrofoam rubber and then the AstroTurf on top of it. If your skin wasn't entirely raspberried from turf burn, then I can't imagine what it did to your joints and everything else. But now, I think the softness or the give of the turf, unfortunately, also can create a false confidence for the lower extremity of your leg of a plant standpoint, and then all of a sudden, your knees,
right.
That's where you get the non-contact knee injury and everything else.
The turf they had before, and I want to be clear, I am reading words to you. I don't know what these words fully mean because I'm not a turf guy, but what they previously had, this from a Fox 59 article from last August, and it was mapping out the changes to the turf that took place this summer. As of January 6, 2023, Lucas Oil Stadium is one of 6 NFL venues utilizing slit film turf. The year prior, the NFL Players Association had asked the league to ban and replace slit film turf. And the new turf Lucas Oil is getting is called Matrix turf, which is a monofilament type surface. It's also utilized at SoFi Stadium, where the Rams obviously play, AT&T Stadium for the Cowboys.
Does it use all of the rubber pellets, like the false soil?
I just know it's a different type of turf. Right. And the item of note there, Jake, the stadiums referenced, SoFi and AT&T Stadium, are viewed as the hallmark beacons of new state-of-the-art technology in the league. So you would think, again, totally of ignorance, if that's the type of turf that they're using, that you would think it is a better turf overall.
Have you heard, and I think most people know the story of the fact that I have at my place several strips of AstroTurf, right? The original AstroTurf from the Astrodome.
Your James Bond moment over there.
Correct. But now I'm like, yeesh, I don't know, because have you heard the story about the turf at the Philadelphia Veterans Stadium?
Mm-mm.
And I mean this seriously. I'm not making light of any of this. The Philadelphia Phillies, if you think about the players that played for the Philadelphia Phillies, there are, I believe, 7 of them. That this is an incredible story that the Philadelphia, and I had first heard of this a couple of years ago, and the Philadelphia Inquirer was just did like a huge research project on this. The turf at Philadelphia's Veterans Stadium, and I don't know if it was a different kind of turf than other places, but Tug McGraw, Darren Dalton, John Vukovich, John Oates, and Ken Brett, David West as well, are all players that played for the Philadelphia Phillies, primarily in the mid to late 80s and into the early 90s, that all played on the turf at Veterans Stadium that has a different chemical compound in it called PFAs that they believe led to a brain cancer for all 6 of those men. And that all 6 of those men, those players that I just mentioned, died of rare forms of cancer, and they now believe they can link that cancer, the origin of it, to them standing on that turf, and quite frankly, for lack of a better phrase, the vapor or the heat coming off of the turf from as early as 1982 and the compounds that came up basically through the melting of the plastic into the atmosphere as they were standing on it for hours and hours on end.
Man.
Which is both fascinating and terrifying, right?
Yeah.
And I mean this legitimately. I mean, I'm not, but so I've got like strips of AstroTurf, and I'm like, man, like, does this have the same thing? Now, they're not sitting under the heat lamps of a sun. So maybe that, but, and you look at the thousands of people that would have been at games at Veterans Stadium. But stuff like that is crazy, right? But you think about the elementary, aside from the PFAs that was in those turf, but the early form of AstroTurf, I mean, it's crazy. Safety aside, just if you watch Pete Rose's 4,192nd hit off Eric Shaw at Riverfront Stadium in Cincinnati, which I believe, by the way, was September 11th, but 1985. If you watch that hit, he hits basically just a line drive to right center, and it bounces like 90 feet in the air. I mean, playing on that turf had to have been just all aspects of it had to have just been awful. Guys that I'm betting you that Bill Brooks or Eric Dickerson or Jeff George are guys that played on that turf in the RCA Dome probably are like, yeah, I don't miss a single thing about it. Because you're just, and it's just like plastic. I mean, it's crazy. You either use it for your backyard to potty train your dog or for an NFL game with a half an inch of foam underneath it.
Is that why you're keeping the turf, just in case you need to potty train a pet?
Well, we have a new, by the way, Little Man, who is the new puppy that we have. I think I told you we have a new member of the family.
You did mention that.
He's getting ready to go on a crash course lesson of the potty training. Because so far, for whatever reason, I know this is stunning. Simply saying to him, "You need to do that outside." That's not.
It hasn't worked.
It hasn't taken off yet.
His siblings haven't taught him yet?
They just look at him like, you're on your own, brother. Stephen Holder joins us, by the way, top of the hour. In watching France against Team Canada in the Olympic basketball matchup, one thing I can tell you, it is amazing the number of, it's essentially all NBA players, but Canada is not messing around defensively, but they got themselves in a huge hole early and basically had to do exactly that. But what's interesting is in order for Canada to climb back in, they got within 5 late in the game here. Andrew Nembhard not on the floor for a great part of this Canadian run, which is interesting because it is defensively that's allowed them to get back into it. And Nembhard's a pretty good defender, but they're getting right in the face of France, but it's a pretty great environment, pretty fun environment to watch.
Yeah, the defense has been physical. You're getting to see a little taste of Victor Wembanyama. Maybe you didn't watch a lot of Spurs games last year, so you're getting a little bit of a feel for that on Team France. I mean, it looked like a game that was going to be a blowout that now has the competitive flavor, but I'll admit, I'd rather have Nembhard out there than Dylan Brooks. But
I'm not going to lie to you, the competitive flavor for Canada, secondary to the flavor of their potato chips.
Is it?
Yeah. Eddie, do you still have the ketchup chips that I brought in, you guys?
No.
The ketchup chips that I found, which are, I believe, the generic Aldi brand, how would you equate those to the Lay's Canadian ketchup tomato chips?
See, I prefer kettle chips as it is.
Correct.
And I thought those were really good.
They were pretty solid.
I enjoyed them. They're pretty tasty. There's still some in the cookhouse. I haven't fully purged the bag yet.
Do they still make Crunchers potato chips? When I was in high school, Crunchers barbecue chips were sold in the cafeteria at school, and that was like gold. And one day the power went out in the middle of lunch, and the cafeteria was landlocked. There were kind of like we are right now. You couldn't see, there were no windows.
Yeah.
So it got pitch black. Like everybody's sitting there eating lunch, all of a sudden the power goes out, and then everybody realized after 20 seconds or so it hadn't come back on. And when it finally did come back on, people were scurrying out of the snack lines with honey buns falling out of their pants, and the barbecue Crunchers were absolutely it was unbelievable.
Like it was something out of the apocalypse.
Yes,
like, we're just throwing
totally.
chairs at the
After like 20 seconds,
line.
people are like, wait a minute. And it was like it was like a land rush to go up there. It was unbelievable. See, I don't think the barbecue, the Crunchers brand potato chips, I don't think they're still around. These are not I'm not talking about the Jay's brand Crunchers, but like actual Crunchers brand barbecue chips. They were so good.
The kettle chip that I always remember seeing in the cafeteria, or you'll see it if you're going to like a local sub shop, is the Kettle brand. Like that was kind of if you wanted kettle chips, that was of my childhood. They always had the different colored packaging based on the flavor. Like I think salt and vinegar was like a light blue or a green for sour cream.
Salt and vinegar is also pretty underrated as a chip, I believe, right?
Green for jalapeno. My apologies. Yes.
What about sour cream and onion? You get into the sour cream and onion?
Love sour cream and onion.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
I need to be home if I'm eating those because I need to brush my teeth after.
I would totally agree with that. Yes, you better have some Altoids or something nearby, right?
Yes.
No question about it. When you were in high school, what was the junk food snack at lunch that you look back on now and you think, really? No wonder why I would crash out during study hall.
We had milkshakes.
We did the Roncalli cafeteria cookies. They were cooked. They were cooked to a point. I should backtrack that. They weren't cooked to a point, so they were just gooey enough.
That's pretty
where
solid.
you could you got a 2-pack.
Okay.
You could take those for days. I still have them when I go for football games.
How about honey
delicious?
buns?
Honey buns are solid. Yeah.
We also had cookies at Decatur Central.
Sure.
Did you have the honey buns that were heated so like the plastic on it looked like the RCA dome?
And we had cinnamon rolls.
Cinnamon rolls basically honey buns, right?
No.
What about the watermelon gummies, Eddie? Did you have a lot of those at DC?
No.
We had
I didn't serve those yet.
we had the Bosco sticks.
Oh, yeah. Those were every
Cheese-filled
Friday.
breadsticks?
Every Friday.
Moscow. You should use that as a passcode. The cookies were good. Honey buns, the chips. I'm trying to think of what else. I think that's really it. Like, we weren't allowed to have soft drinks. Did you guys have soft drink machines?
No.
We had machines, yeah.
Well, I mean, there might have been a machine or two. But
Were you allowed to leave school during lunch?
No.
Yeah, we weren't either.
With the most
Legally,
unique,
no.
exactly. The most unique item lunch-wise, Wednesdays was Papa John's Pizza Day. So they would order a bunch of Papa John's, and you would your goal before you went down was to coordinate with your buddy. Hey, you want to split a pizza? And so you go in there, get to the line, and then we'll take a large pepperoni, and then you go and you split.
That's pretty solid.
Yeah.
We did do Jason Venturi and I and Mike Gangstead senior year took the liberty to. I mean, you weren't supposed to leave for lunch, but when you were seniors, you kind of could get away with it. But we decided to go to a different Taco Bell for lunch every Thursday during the second semester, and then to see how far away we could go. And we were so proud of ourselves because we went to the Carmel Taco Bell during lunch break of North Central.
Nice.
So we left school, drove all the way to the Carmel Taco Bell, got Taco Bell, made it back, and lunch is like 28 minutes or something. We also had lunch at North Central. If you think about this, we had lunch at 10:23 in the morning. That's insanity, right? But when you have that many kids, you got to feed.
You got to divvy it up somewhere. Yeah.
We had 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So we had 5 different lunch periods. So and if you got there late, you got like 4. You sit down, you got 4 minutes to eat, and you're on about your way. It was an express trip. Stephen Holder, by the way, was yesterday at Colts camp. We saw him out at Grand Park in Westfield.
Did you say he was in swimming trunks?
I think so. They were. Would you list them as swimming trunks or fashionable shorts?
I would say fashionable shorts because they had a nice pattern. The little, I don't know, the dots pattern on the shorts were nice.
Vineyard Vines, it looked like that brand.
Yeah. I would support that.
Like maybe
yes.
the little whales on it or something, or your little penguins, that kind of thing.
Yes, I would agree with that.
Look kind of like that. J&V just walked in. John, you're an hour early. Are you on? Are you on Nova Scotia time here?
Olympic basketball driving JMB today.
That would be France and Canada. He wanted to see the end of it. Stephen Holder joins us next. is underway in Indianapolis. For that matter, the 2 o'clock hour is underway everywhere in the Eastern time zone. My name is Jake Query. Eddie Garrison is the guy manning the controls for us. Jimmy Cook, the other voice you hear in this program. We call it Query and Company on 93.5 and 107.5. The Fan. Joining us now on the Express Pro Tire and Auto Guest line. You can read his work at ESPN.com. Stephen Holder is a veteran writer of covering the National Football League, including the Tampa Bay Bucks in his earlier days, and now covering the Colts and league-wide for that matter. And, Stephen, let's get right to this point. Yesterday we talked to Shane Steichen. I thought he was pretty transparent about the fact that it appears as though the safety spot is one that is still wide open. And then I got to thinking about it, and I thought we like to harp on the fact that Chris Ballard has not addressed certain areas, but the precedent for the Colts would be this is a position perhaps sometimes that you can go to the late garage sales and find yourself a deal and fill it. Do you think the Colts might still have that security blanket in the back of their mind of Julian Blackmon's played well, we have athletes in the rest of the room, but we still might be able to fill this outside what we currently have?
Oh, yeah. I think it's very, very much on the table that they do something. I mean, obviously, Justin Simmons is the name that we've all been talking about. Whether they make a move there, I'm not prepared to predict that, but have they talked? That is my impression that, yes, they have. But where that actually stands right now, I don't know. But I think the larger point remains that they can and possibly will still do something at that position. And I think here's why. I mean, they have tried, I think, roughly 3 different combinations at safety between strong safety and free safety and moving the musical chairs around. They've tried 3 different combinations, and none of them have stuck, And so where does that leave you? That leaves you with, okay, we maybe don't have great options. Julian Blackmon has had a fantastic camp, okay? Here is sort of the complexity when it comes to him. I think you can certainly move him from strong safety to free safety. That is absolutely doable, and you would have a very reliable defensive back in the back end of your defense if you did that. However, this comes 1 year after the Colts moved him from free safety to strong safety last season, and then subsequently Julian Blackmon had what he would estimate to be his best season as a pro. So that was a very successful move. The problem is you don't have a free safety. So my point is, if you move him back to free safety, you're now weakening strong safety, and you're also perhaps not utilizing a good player in the way that is most efficient and most valuable for your team. So I don't know exactly how this is going to play out, but I do think that a move is very much in the cards, or very much on the table, I guess, because it's just right where they stand right now. I just don't see great options. I see problems with every possible solution that they have right now.
Stephen, let me share with you an epiphany that I had earlier today, and then I want you to tell me if you think it's way off base or if it's a fair assessment. After watching yesterday and really in talking to Shane Steichen and looking over things, I had this epiphany that the Colts defensive back room, we'll take Blackmon out of the equation. I do like Julian Blackmon a lot, but the other safeties that they have a lot of guys that are uber athletic that they're still waiting for the football tendencies and instincts to come around. And then in the tight end room, they have guys that are football bodies, but they're waiting for the athleticism to come around. And literally, they're like polar opposites of what they ultimately would like to see and what they currently have within each 2 positions. Is there any legitimacy to that observation?
Well, I think where there's a connection between those 2 units is the undeniable connection. I think you're mostly right, but the bigger connection that I see that runs through them is that at both of them you have unproven guys who you are projecting and hoping they become what you want them to be. The thing at tight end, I think tight end is a more the depth, I guess, at tight end is more acceptable right now. Now, they don't have any elite players at tight end. They don't have one elite player at that spot. However, they have 3 or 4 good players, they think, who can contribute right now and at least have made some contributions in the past. I think when you look at safety, you have Nick Cross, who started a handful of games. You have Ronnie Harrison, who, frankly, the Colts signed him to play linebacker last season, okay? And no one really was interested in signing him to be a safety from my understanding. So he was on the market late in the summer because no one was interested in signing him as a safety. He gets signed by the Colts, but only to play linebacker. And now you're offering him up as a solution to your problems at safety, a possible solution to your problems at safety. Well, that doesn't really make a lot of sense to me, right? So I guess what I'm saying is at both spots, there are questions. The questions are bigger at safety, but I think tight end, it's also critical. We should not overlook that, and I'm glad you brought it up because I think tight end is a bigger, I don't want to say problem, but it's a factor. It's an issue, I guess, that we should be talking about because we're assuming someone's going to jump up and make that jump. But why are we assuming that? I don't know that we should. So I'm interested to see how that plays out. I would say through training camp, no one has done that at tight end. They've all played their roles, but I don't think anyone has jumped off the page in my estimation.
Stephen, is the Colts tight end and lack of dynamic athleticism within that group or playmaking guy, is that the anomaly in the NFL or the norm? Are we jaded because we look at Kittle or Kelsey and think that every team has a guy like that?
Well, great question. And so, in fact, one of the NFL projects I'm working on right now is a project about this era of tight ends and how prevalent they have become in respective teams' offenses. And I've thought a lot about the Colts in doing the reporting on this. We talked about tight end university a few weeks ago, you recall, when I got that ticket driving back from Nashville.
That's right.
But anyhow, shout out to Kentucky's finest. But anyway, the point is, I've actually thought a lot about the Colts in doing this and in reporting this project because one of the things that some of the guys have said to me is that, it used to be you had your Tony Gonzalez's and your Antonio Gates, and you had a handful of teams that had an elite tight end. And now it feels like, several guys say this, now it feels like everybody has one. And it's hard not to feel that way. Just go around and look at, a random list of 5 or 6 teams. You can pick them out of a hat, and I bet you out of 5 teams, 3 or 4 of them are going to have a guy who is a very high-level tight end. And so that's where I think the Colts are different. I think they're in the minority. And that's why I think it's a bigger issue than we're probably making it. The one thing I'll say in their defense is that Shane Steichen is so good that he figures out how to get the best out of each player. So I think he can work with a room that is not or maybe does not possess an elite player. They just basically become sort of, worker bees, and he figures out who can do what, and they play their roles. But it would be much easier if you had a higher-end guy that you can, play for a majority of snaps. That probably won't be the case here, I don't think.
ESPN Stephen Holder is our guest. He joins us on the Express Pro Tire and Auto guest line. Stephen, we had Shane Steichen on yesterday, and I asked him specifically about that tight end room for all the reasons that you have outlined, which is, I phrased it to him in a way that, hey, I know you're not going to disparage your own group of tight ends, but you're Dallas Goedert in Philadelphia, and he fits right in that range. Depending on the year, you could find him in a top 5 or a top 10 list of tight ends in the National Football League. He is the ideal piece, I think, to a Shane Steichen-led offense. I don't want to speak for you, but just from my seat, I asked Jake that earlier, there's no reason to necessarily expect somebody from this group of Jelani Woods or Molly Cox or Kylan Granson are finally going to become this otherworldly tight end. And the other point about, is it just us being jaded in this market, or does everybody really have one? Some of JMV's favorite nerds, the PFF crew, they put together their list of top position players around the league. The Colts don't have a top 32 tight end based on their ranks. There's teams with 2 tight ends that take those spots. The Colts are not viewed as a team with a mid to bottom of the league level tight end at that position. It's a long soliloquy of asking you, with all of that, combined with what Eddie had brought up last week, the nugget from Giants Hard Knocks that the Colts tried to call and trade up for a spot that likely would have been an offensive weapon. Do you envision this being a true last dance audition year for this entire tight end room? Because if it was Bowers they were going after, it's clear that's the next offensive piece they want to be around Anthony Richardson, in my mind anyway.
Well, I mean, I don't know if it was Bowers. I mean,
it could have been a Dunze. We've talked about it. Like, there's a lot of names there. It would have been a powerful impact offensive position for sure.
But I think that's the point, right? Exactly. They were going for an offensive playmaker. That is definitely the reality of it. And I would say that, to your point about the majority of teams having sort of a playmaking tight end, I do agree with that. And when you lack one, I think it goes back to something I've said before, which is I don't think we certainly have to distinguish between wide receivers and tight ends, but I do think that there is a broader way to look at all of this, which is offensive playmakers, nameless, faceless, right? Or in terms of position. Don't worry about position. Do you have offensive playmakers? I mean, do the Kansas City Chiefs care that Travis Kelce is a tight end? I mean, do they go into their game plan thinking, well, we could throw him a lot of passes this week, but he's a tight end? No, I mean, he's an offensive playmaker. Yeah. They don't care what he plays. It doesn't matter. I bet you the defense doesn't care that he's a tight end because they're game planning against him, right? So that's the concept I'm talking about. They don't have anybody that puts you in that mind frame in their tight end room. So I agree. I think I'm not saying it's a death sentence to the offense, but I do think it's something you have to work around and you have to overcome because you have to get that production elsewhere. And it impacts play design because when you have an elite tight end, you're able to position them in ways that put greater stress on the defense because of the way tight ends are used. Their dual purpose ability, they can block, they can run routes. So you have a little bit of deceptiveness there. I guess it'll be up to these guys to step up and to show that they can be that. But what we have right now is a bunch of potential. And potential's great in August. It doesn't mean anything in September. So that's where I stand on it. And the last thing I would say is this. I talk about potential, but you have a couple guys who clearly we know what they are. Like, I know what Kylan Granson is. That is not a knock. I think he's definitely a good player, but not an elite player, and probably somebody who's not going to become an elite player. He's probably where he's at right now. This is probably his ceiling, what we've seen. Mo Alley Cox, same thing. I think we've seen his ceiling. Also not a knock. That's just we've seen him long enough to know what he is. So you're talking about a couple of young guys now who really have never done anything that you're counting on or hoping that they make a big jump. That's a big prediction to make, and especially Jelani Woods, I think, has not been as consistent as I would like to have seen in this training camp so far. So that's a little disappointing as well.
Going back to the other position group Jake had asked you about in regards to that safety room, there's been a lot of teams that have been linked to Justin Simmons, the tight end from Denver, who's now a free agent after getting cut. Let's say just a player like him was out there, a veteran player you could bring in. How long would it take them to get up to speed with what Gus Bradley wants out of this defense? And are we too far along in terms of what's left on the offseason schedule for them to get somebody up to speed to fill that void if it winds up not being filled internally?
No, I think that if it's Justin Simmons in particular, for example, I think they could definitely get him going. They have enough time. They still have preseason games. But even if they didn't, I don't even think that's the most important thing. There's going to be two factors. What kind of shape is he in, whoever the player is? If it's someone who's coming off the street, like Simmons, he needs to be in shape. And you would presume that someone like him understands the circumstances. And I think he's 30 years old. He's a veteran. He knows that he's got to have his body in shape. You'd think he would know his body. But that's the first thing. Then the second thing is you've got to get him up to speed on the terminology. That's going to be the hard part. It's doable, but it is a challenge and it is time consuming. So it would require some cramming, sort of the night before the final exam level cramming. And they could do it, though. It could certainly be done, particularly by a veteran player. It's likely going to be someone who would play free safety. I do think that's a position where you could slide in and kind of, play somewhat instinctively. Obviously, you have to know the scheme and you have to know the concepts, but a lot of these concepts are interchangeable. Everybody in the league has played these coverages. There's just some finer points that may be different from team to team. And again, the language and terminology is what's unique to specific teams. So that's what he'd have to learn.
I know this will stun you, Stephen, but when you said cramming the night before the final, you're speaking my language.
Oh, listen, let me tell you. Listen, I know I was destined to become a writer because I never did a research paper before like the night before.
Correct.
That was me.
Spell check. That's the entire editing process, right? Spell check, send. There you go.
Exactly.
Stephen, what position? Stephen Holder's our guest on the Express Pro Tire and Auto Gas line. You can read his work at ESPN.com. What position, in your opinion, in the NFL, aside from kicker or punter, is the most interchangeable from one franchise to the next? The easiest position for a guy to be airdropped in and have to learn his teammates on the fly is where?
Oh, I think running back most likely. And the reason for that is because, well, first of all, they treat it like it's an interchangeable position, right? I mean, we just drop running backs in off the street and they play on Sunday half the time. I mean, that does happen. But even besides that, I think it's still the position that is most instinctive. You know what I mean? Like, there's only so many blocking schemes. There's only so many ways to read a hole, and a lot of that is instinctive. And so, as much as the running back needs to understand the concepts of the offensive line is running and all of that, that's much more so important to the quarterback. I think the hardest part about playing running back a lot of times, it's funny, it's not the running, it's the pass protection. That's where young players struggle. They struggle with understanding the blocking schemes and the protections. And that's where a lot of times young running backs who are late round picks or undrafted picks, that's the thing that keeps them off the field in most cases. So I think there is an element of playing the position that is difficult, but really it's not the one that we think about. A lot of playing running back, I think, frankly, having never done it, but just from what I know, a lot of it is very much instinctive and, based on physical ability. And, if you're a smart football player, you can figure it out.
Defensively, could it be safety?
Perhaps. The only thing I would say, it depends on the scheme to a degree. I do think it depends on the scheme. I mean, maybe in some schemes, outside linebacker, maybe, depending on how you play. It kind of depends. It really is defensive specific, I think, to answer that question on defense. But I would say there are some systems where safety could be among the easier spots. That is definitely true. It really depends on the kinds of coverages you emphasize. The one thing that's also important at safety is the safeties are involved a lot in the communication among the defensive backs because those guys have to be on the same page because coverages don't work if two guys are playing different coverages, right? So safeties are very much responsible for a lot of the communication that happens on the back end. And I give you Week 18 last season, the big play by C.J. Stroud to open the game. My understanding of that is that was a communication breakdown, and frankly, not just a matter of getting beat. So that goes to show you that's the important part there. Physically, a lot of it is instinctive. Like, you got to cover a lot of ground, go get the ball, right, or go make the tackle. But it's that I think a lot of it's pre-snap and then the communication between you and the other defensive backs.
Stephen, does Anthony Richardson look extremely comfortable out in camp? Obviously, the only real observation I've gotten in person was yesterday prior to, last year, seeing him out there as a rookie. But does he look comfortable and like he's in command of what he wants out there? And how long do you think, as the season goes, if you agree with that sentiment, that you see that same level of comfortability at the position in the regular season?
I say yes, absolutely. And that has exhibited it has exhibited itself in various ways. One is obvious because you can just watch him. He's between snaps, he's dancing, he's doing his thing. He obviously knows when to get serious, but he's very loose. This is not a guy who is worried about making mistakes, or does he know what he's doing? Does he have to sell himself to the veterans? None of that. He's not worried about that. He has done the work, and they accept him as their leader. He is asserting himself, from what I'm told. And the offensive linemen have, I think, really emphasized this, including Quentin Nelson, who doesn't just hand out compliments. Okay, and he has emphasized that Anthony Richardson has really asserted himself as a leader and really has immersed himself in the offense and is making it his offense. That is a big step. That's a really big step for young players, right? There's a difference between going out there and just running the offense and taking command of the offense and making it yours and anticipating things that are going to come up. Like, he's at that level now, from what guys say. And I think it's a very good thing for the Colts. So I think he's had a really good camp. And a lot of times with Anthony Richardson, it's hard to appreciate all of his potential in training camp because it just doesn't lend itself to his kind of game. His kind of game is he makes things happen when things go wrong.
Do they need, Stephen, for that reason, do the Colts need to reapproach is maybe the wrong word, but I was thinking about this in terms of the offensive line. Is it now imperative that their line becomes more athletically flexible? And let me explain what I mean by that. You now have a quarterback maybe that we haven't even seen. I mean, Luck would be the closest, but that a guy now, Braden Smith, Quentin Nelson, whoever it may be, Ryan Kelly, Bernard Ryman, they're going to be plays where they're going into it assuming it's a pass play, and then within 4 to 5 seconds of the snap, it's now becoming a downfield running play. And the flexibility that is necessary in positioning, stance, pivot, movement, is that the kind of thing a line works on?
So a couple things. Yes, for sure. You certainly you play things out. For example, there's times in training camp where maybe they should blow the whistle, but they don't blow it, and they let the play out. And that gives you a chance to replicate the kinds of circumstances you're talking about, plays that break down. I mean, there's no consequence, right, to just don't play the whistle and just let it play out. So you'll see that happen a lot in training camp. I think that's a good thing to do, and it gives them a trial run for some of the stuff that you're talking about. But the other thing I would say, a couple other things. Number one, they do have what I consider to be an athletic offensive line. So I think they're good there. Quentin Nelson's a great example. Even at 300 plus pounds, I mean, this is a guy who is renowned for his athletic ability and can get down the field. He pulls as a blocker. He's fantastic at that. So this guy can move. Same thing at left tackle. Ryan Kelly as well. So, I mean, they're in good shape there. But those plays that you're talking about, this is the second thing, and probably the more important thing. The kinds of plays you're talking about where those, fire drill type situations, I think it really falls more on the receivers and tight ends. Because when you get downfield, it's those guys who really, when you get to the second level particularly, now you're talking about you're having to block the defensive backs and linebackers, and that's going to fall to the tight ends and the running backs. So those guys, they have to be hyper aware on two fronts. If the play breaks down, stay alive, because Anthony Richardson's not going to go down easily. He's still trying to get you the ball. Now, he may end up running, but he doesn't set out to run. He's going to run to throw initially. So stay alive and get yourself open. And if that doesn't happen, get ready to go find somebody and put your helmet in their chest and block them. So everybody's got to keep their head on a swivel this year. And just be ready for just about anything.
Steven, do we get a firm answer, do you think, by, let's say, week 5 in regards to what they fully want out of the rest of that running back room behind Jonathan Taylor? Or is that something that you think gets settled clearly by the time week 1 arrives?
You're talking about the rest of that room behind Taylor?
I know it's probably so late in the game that a Zach Moss type of story is not in that room, right. but based on where they maybe find an extra couple bits of juice for a rest for Jonathan Taylor, do we get a clear-cut answer, or is that a second on the depth chart by committee approach?
I think right now it's probably by committee, but I think we have a lot of time left because the good thing about preseason is, well, first of all, Jonathan Taylor ain't touching the football, okay? Because why? So
yeah.
I mean, he may get a carry or two. I don't know, but I certainly don't expect it. Okay, so let's just set that aside. So these guys are going to get a lot of carries. They're going to have probably different roles from week to week. You probably want to get a couple different guys with the starting unit, with that starting offensive line to really get a good look at them. So I think you're going to get very, very good assessment of these running backs, and I think you'll have a very good picture over the next couple of weeks. At least you should. So they still believe they have a lot of talent back there. They do not have a Zach Moss. That is true, and I do think it's a downgrade right now in terms of the depth in that room. That doesn't mean, though, that one of these guys can't emerge. I do think that we saw Jonathan Taylor pointed this out the other day. The Pittsburgh game last season, which I think is one that Taylor missed, I mean, they ran for a lot of yards that game. And that was, I believe, Zach Moss might have been out that game as well, or at least was injured in that game. So these guys have stepped up before, and I'm talking about, the likes of Trey Sermon. I think Tyler Goodson, played in that game as well. These guys have played roles before. So, and Evan Hull is a wild card, right? He hurt all of last year. Someone they were very high on. They drafted him. Evan Hull, you'll see this in a story that I have coming out tomorrow on Jonathan Taylor, actually. Evan Hull was with Jonathan Taylor and Frank Gore down in South Florida this summer working out, and Frank Gore told me he was actually quite impressed with Evan Hull. So I'm interested to see how they look under the lights. That's really all that matters. Training camp for running backs is kind of like Disneyland. They're not really hitting them. And so let's see what it looks like. I'm interested to see how that plays out.
How are things going on the Slivka feature? Derek Slivka, the kid out of Ithaca. It's going to shock the world.
Strangely enough, they told me to prioritize a couple other things. So, we're working through it, though. We're working through it.
Well, here's the thing. You got plenty of time because it's going to be around mid-November when he really starts breaking through.
Is that early, huh?
I'm telling you. You just wait. I have this unique ability to point something out, and everybody laughs, and then a couple days later, people go, you know what? And then my phone blows up, and people come up to me, and they're like, 0 bars are pretty good. I'm just telling you.
Hey, Steven, also in that same vein, I know you're not a gambling man, but if you're wanting to see the prediction prowess in action, the White Sox losing streak ends tonight per Jake Query. So
they've lost 21 straight, Steven. I'm guaranteeing it tonight. They go into the hostile environment of 4,200 people against the A's.
Why tonight?
Why tonight? I honed in on the number 21. I'm like, the streak ends at 21. I just had this feeling. And they've lost 21 straight. They're sitting on 21. It ain't going 22.
They've tied the American League record.
Yeah, it ain't going 22.
All right, blackjack. Call it.
I'm telling you. You watch. Tonight, about 12 o'clock, my phone's going to blow up with people texting me like, holy cow, you were right.
I'm here for it, man. I'm here for it.
I've never been more sure about anything. Stephen Holder, Express Pro Tire and Auto Guest Line, ESPN.com, where you can read his work. Appreciate it as always, Stephen.
All right, you got it.
Stephen Holder joining us. I'm telling you, mark my words.
You might increase tenfold the viewership of that game just based on your prediction alone. Because people will be locked in to see it. What, do you have a premonition? Okay, all right. Shh. Quiet. Division's happening.
I initially thought 5-2.
Oh, okay. Calling the shot.
I'm moving that to 3-2.
3-2 final.
Yep.
White Sox end the streak. Okay.
I'm telling you. What are you guys going to do if this happens? Other than call each other and go, you got to be kidding me.
Well, yeah, there'll probably be a call of like, man.
No offense, Jake. You have a 50-50 shot at being right here.
No, but the score. I mean, throwing the score in there.
Eddie, a 50-50 shot. They've lost 21 in a row. Yes. And I realize that mathematically speaking, if you flip a coin 25 times, I get it. But I'm telling you. But the A's suck. But the White Sox.
They suck more.
Yeah, you're right. They're like the vacuum cleaner guy at Fish.
I realize we're opening a full can of degeneracy worms here, but that's what I do on a daily basis. You can go correct score on this. White Sox 3-2 final plus 2,000 juice.
5-2. Is that what you said?
No, he said 3-2. He said 5-2 initially, but then he went to 3-2.
So plus 2,000. That means if I put $2 on it, what do I win?
If you put $2, I'm
400.
Yeah, that's probably right. Brain don't work too good. No, if you put $2 on it, $42 would be your payout.
Oh yeah.
Oh, come on. That's
I had
ridiculous.
An extra zero on there.
If you put $10 on there, $200 though.
That's ridiculous. To predict the exact score?
I don't make the juice. I don't make the odds. I'm just reading you the data.
That's absurd.
I would have thought it would have been a little higher.
You think?
Maybe it's because 3-2 is viewed as a common baseball score. I don't know.
I mean, this gets into, I should know this because I just had to take a math class. And you start getting into the exponent. What's it called when you have like the number of different mathematical possibilities?
Permutations.
Thank you. It gets into that, which is just astronomical, right?
Potential outcomes.
Yeah. I mean, come on. They're going to pay me $20 for that? My work's worth more than that.
I would agree.
And put more money down. Yesterday was 5-1, by the way.
Hey, if you want to go straight beat
down.
I
listened to it.
I don't want to mess up the premonitions because 3-2 is what Jake has said.
Permutations.
Yeah. Well, yes, but in this instance, I'm talking about the prediction itself. If you wanted a beatdown White Sox win, 7-0, $2 get you $152.
Even that. First off, the odds of that happening.
I know.
They should come to your house and deliver you
Publishers
the bank.
Clearinghouse.
Yeah, Ed McMahon shows up at your front door for crying out loud. I'm telling you, though, you mark my words. I'm telling you right now, you mark my words. Tonight, streak comes to an end.
Where does this rank between, and obviously one's already gone final, but between IU Michigan, Purdue, Oregon, and the White Sox streak?
Oh.
Where is this at? In the middle? Is this higher than Oregon and Purdue?
I've never been more sure about anything in my life than the fact that the White Sox tonight are ending the streak.
All right.
Now, the score, these things, I'll
give you a pass on the score. You called the streaks yesterday. The score is just a little cherry on top.
Correct.
The Sunday was still made either way.
But I'm telling you right now, those of you that are White Sox fans.
There's White Sox fans?
Bruce Martin. Sam Rumsa. I think Tony Donahue's a White Sox fan.
I thought Tony was a Reds fan.
Well, Tony's he's got 19 favorite. You ever notice that? During the NCAA tournament, he's
kinda
go
like
Kansas, go Florida, go Texas A&M, go Texas Christian. It's like, what?
Kind of like Jimmy, He just appears out of nowhere as a Florida Panthers fan,
Jimmy waits until mid-October to figure out his favorite Major League Baseball team, and early January, he's suddenly figuring out who his
I've never swayed with my loyalties, gents. You can say I root for a lot of good teams. That's fine, but I've never swayed.
Okay. You went up and wore, you were completely decked out. Who's that team you saw in South Bend over the last weekend?
Manchester?
I didn't have a jersey of
Football
that team.
Club? No,
it was Celtic versus Chelsea.
You're right. You didn't have a jersey. You had a kit. I saw it.
I did wear something. I'm going to share with you what I wore because Scotland was America's Cinderella story in the Euros. They've never won. They haven't made it to the knockouts of a major tournament ever in their country's history. I bought a Scotland jersey for $5 on eBay, and I wore that Scotland jersey because
it's a kit.
Well, the kit's the whole uniform.
Okay.
But I wore the jersey or kit because Celtic, who played Chelsea up at South Bend, is from Scotland, and it felt appropriate.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
You would be. Can we talk for a second though? A club from Scotland, who is admittedly one of the most famous clubs in Europe.
You can say team, it's okay.
But the amount of support that they have, like Chelsea is a world-renowned club, but the amount of, and so is Celtic. But
I like that Chelsea's in Broadable. They have cute gifts and things like that.
Are you not at all surprised? We talk about how popular or not so popular soccer is. Like they're having capacity crowds at these college stadiums across the United States when they do these European tours. Like, it's really cool to see that level of the sport.
That doesn't surprise me, though.
Not at all?
No. Because I think especially, and I don't mean, just realistically, demographically speaking, that's also of the age of the target demo audience.
That's fair.
And if you're going into college towns, which is smart, South Bend, what other places have they done
They
this?
were Ohio State last week.
Columbus, which has an MLS team, right?
Yep.
But
I think they did Chapel Hill.
Okay, those are places where that's a big show coming to town, right? It's
Sure.
different than if you try to do it in New York City or whatever else.
Yeah, it's a good point.
Jimmy's, by the way, his plays of the day coming up in about 15, and I can tell you one that he should pick. and this is what drives me nuts. They're like, look, I thought you were sure that Indiana was going to beat Michigan. First off, did you not see that first quarter? And secondly, I had one slip up, and I was sure of that too. But just the fact that I was, I remember Ari Lyondike, when Ari Lyondike Jr. decided to become a race car driver, and somebody asked Ari Lyondike, why do you think your son will be a good race car driver? And he said, well, he's got big, and then I don't know if I should say the wording that he used. And then he said, no, I mean, like, literally he does. Do you realize, like, the cojones that I had to have to make that prediction of Indiana, Michigan? And I stood by it. But nobody credits me when I'm correct. They just remember the one time that I was wrong. It's happened 3 times in my life that I've been wrong. That was one of them. Everybody remembers it. But I'm just telling you, I am absolutely certain on this one.
In mine and Eddie's defense, the body of work of the Jake predictions that we've been blessed with is just that one. So we don't have a ton to, like, you haven't called your shot a ton since we've worked together in the last year.
He called his shot on.
What am I doing right here?
You're pointing to the camera.
But what am I doing?
You're pointing to the camera.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Jimmy.
No problem.
I'm calling my shot. What's that, Eddie? What were you going to say?
You also called your shot on Joseph Newgarden winning the 500.
That is true.
And?
That is true.
What happened?
He won the 500.
That is true. And I mean, meant no disrespect.
No,
He did call Newgarden.
nobody remembers that. He started like 17th. Nobody remembers that, right?
Obviously, I do.
Eddie did.
Thank you, Eddie.
You're welcome.
Tonight, it's going to happen again.
You know what? This is a perfect win if it happens for you. I know you don't need it, right? You don't need the masses to be following you, but the level of momentum it creates
It helps.
for no doubt. The level of momentum it creates for Purdue over Oregon with the prediction correct tonight, I feel like is big.
Lot less confident in that. I'm starting the Purdue Oregon. I'm
All right.
starting to fade a little bit.
Okay.
I'm starting to fade a little bit on that.
Hey,
I'm giving myself time.
That's
to
within a
hedge.
grace period. You're fine. Yeah.
You know what I mean? I know it's Georgia, right? That's between the hedges.
Yeah.
But I'm starting to hedge a little bit on
Sure.
it, right? You got your plays of the day next?
I do.
All right, we'll do it on the other side.
Today's plays of the day brought to you by Greenfield Signs and Lighting. Greenfield Signs, a professional, comprehensive sign company with 2 locations in central Indiana. Family-owned and managed business that have been designing and creating effective and attractive signs for more than 4 generations. The perfect place to make a first impression on your clientele.
They just
with
put up
Greenfield
another IU
Signs and
sign
Lighting.
down at IU Indy.
Indeed. Today's plays of the day, a lot of Olympic mix as well as the MLB. First, we'll start with beach volleyball. We will take the tandem of Sarah Hughes and Kelly Chang of Team USA to move on to the semifinals. They take on Switzerland in their quarterfinal match. That's set to take place around 4 o'clock.
By the way, in my understanding is that the Swiss team in volleyball, they keep getting infractions for being in the neutral zone.
That would be a well played on your part. Switching to basketball, we'll lay the big number today. We'll lay 27 on Team USA to cover the number against Brazil as men's basketball gets set in about a half hour from now. In baseball, give me the Cleveland Guardians to win the money line over the Arizona Diamondbacks. We'll also take cute fella.
Hey, root for me.
The Baltimore Orioles to win the money line. They're on the road against the Toronto Blue Jays. Last one for you. I'm all chips in. I'm going to follow Jake to the promised land. Is this allowed? Am I allowed to follow? If you want
so
this,
long as you gave me credit, you're cool.
Yeah, Jake Query is the ambassador of this pick for Greenfield Signs and Lighting. It was his prediction. I'm just riding coattails here, okay? White Sox win outright, and then I want the long odds, Jake, although not as long as we would have hoped. 3-2 finals plus 2,000 juice, depending on where you shop around for that. Eddie, any plays for you?
No.
Those are your plays of the day.
I'm telling you.
Also, shout out to spoiler alert. If you don't want to hear Olympic results, turn down the dial very briefly right now. Okay, thank you. Shout out to wait for the counter. All right. Shout out to Team USA women's soccer. They outlast Germany 1-0 in extra time. So they're headed to the gold medal match on Saturday at 11 a.m.
Does that? Okay, so they're in the gold medal round now.
Yep. Yes, sir.
What is the final event of the Olympic Games?
That's a great question. I don't know. That feels like a factoid that you'd see in Trivial Pursuit.
Feels like it should be a track and field event.
I was going to say, it feels like it should be the decathlon, right?
Probably.
Do they still do the steeplechase?
I think so.
Isn't that the one that you got to hop over? The steeplechase is inside. You got to go over the hurdles that land in water, right? Isn't that right?
Yes. Yep. Yeah, it is still there.
Do we? What would you, if you guessed?
The final is today at 3:14 for steeplechase.
What's the steeple they're chasing? Do we know the origin of that name?
It's an obstacle race that derives its name from the steeplechase in horse racing.
Well, I knew that, but
here you go. The event originated in Ireland, where horses and riders race from one town's steeple to the next.
I have a feeling it's going to win tomorrow. The way that lad can go from one steeple to the next. You know, the best winner that actually happens to be that Santa Claus. Thank you.
How could you get down with the but you don't like the pirate? What's wrong with the pirate?
Oh, that's just horrible.
All right.
They're similar, right?
No.
The men's marathon is the last event.
Okay. That's fitting, right?
I guess, I don't know if you know this or not, but the Olympic Village for the marathoners actually stays 26.2 miles out, and then they've got to get to the stadium to end the Olympics for the closing ceremonies. That's how they end it. First guy that gets there, they're like, all right, we're done, and gal.
It looked like you had, as he started that joke, it looked like you had swayed towards the joke drum, and then you pulled back. Is that what happened there?
Yeah, I was hoping for something better.
Okay.
Somebody asked me this question. We've gone over this a few times during the course of the Olympics, but the Olympics have been fun. But now that we're headed down the home stretch of it, of the Summer Olympic Games, and I think I've come up with the answer here. What is the event that if you were given right now the resources and the training in a 4-year time period that you would feel the most confident if you had to compete in the 28 games?
Badminton.
I thought you were going to ask me which one I'd love to win gold in a fantasy world to actually compete in.
Yes.
Oh, Lord. See, here's the issue. Do you have an answer? Because
Yes.
any answer I give is going to be disrespectful to all the Olympians that.
No, understood.
I will say, what I don't know the specific name of the event, which shows the ignorance here, but the one where you had the Turkish gentleman that looked like he was out of a
Correct.
James Bond film.
I think that would be it. Would be
Skeet
some sort
shooting?
of shooting. Yes.
Yeah.
I think the shooting is probably the answer.
Like I'd love to say rowing, but like there's
that is
people
a
that are. That's
workout.
what I'm saying. Like, but he's saying a 4-year regime, and I feel like I wouldn't even get close to being,
I think
playing with
that'd
high
be-
school
I
athletes.
think that'd be way harder.
Right,
than
that's
you
what I'm
think.
saying. So and you say badminton or table tennis, but the movement on those things are absolutely insane.
I would agree with
Certainly
that
on
too.
Table tennis, I wouldn't say that much.
I don't know.
Badminton.
I've watched a little badminton, and you're right. It's not the same vein as table tennis, but they move quick.
By the way, and I don't know if we're going to have time to get to this, but and I hate to
Pole vaulting?
deviate. No, what's happening right now in Paris, which is significant, potentially.
Yes.
Pole vaulting, no way. I think it would be some sort of like the pistol shooting or shooting thing, only
Yeah.
because, and again, to your point, I'm nothing against the incredible feats of those that are in it, but I think that it does not require the overall athletic conditioning that you'd have to be in for others. Right now, Cole Hawker of Cathedral High School is involved in the 1500 men's final. And as they are heading in on the final lap here, we're not allowed to do like a play-by-play of it, but he is potentially in very good position to medal for the United States. And he may be in very good position to medal well for the United States. As a matter of fact,
Wow.
hold on, there are 2 Americans,
I think you're right, Jake.
and I want to see which one actually just won the gold medal. Cole Hawker of Cathedral High School just won the gold medal in the 1,500-meter run.
Way to go, Cole.
And I believe University of Oregon, correct?
Yes. Wow.
That just happened right before our very eyes. He literally was
What a close.
running in 5th heading into the final lap. And that was an
Final
incredible
turn.
finish.
What a moment for him. That's so cool.
What's that?
The final turn, nonetheless, as well.
Yeah, I mean again, we can't go full play on it, but an incredible closing speed.
That was impressive. That was very impressive.
Wow.
So that's cool. I mean, to see, a kid from Indianapolis, David Woods of that's doing freelance work and independent work, sent me a thing that said, I'm like so amped up for the 1,500. I walked all the way around the stadium twice, and it's ridiculously hot here. But that was a strong finish for sure. And I don't know, was he the favorite going in?
No, he was not. He was not. He was, all I could tell you is because, full disclosure, I didn't put it in the plays because the race is supposed to go off before they happened. I had him to win a medal. He was plus 150 to win a medal, tied for 4th best odds to make the podium.
That was a strong finish.
It was.
I mean, that literally was like out of nowhere, holy cow, Sam Hornish off turn number 4.
It was crazy.
Indy 500
It's
analysis.
insane.
So JMV is up next. He's got a big show lined up. And
Way to go,
we will
Cole.
be back with you tomorrow at noon. What do we have lined up for the big program tomorrow, Eddie?
Right now, just Joel Erickson working on some other things. Hopefully, we can get a Colts player tomorrow with him back on the practice field.
I think Cole Hawker was on with the morning show, guys. Was he not, just before the Olympics?
I think so.
He was, yes.
So there you go. And that was a heck of a finish for him. So that is very cool and a great way to end the show. Thanks for listening. We'll be back with you at noon tomorrow here on Query & Company.